The story starts in a noble's household. A baby is born, but in sheer disappointment, the father glares down with sheer disgust, declaring that a total monster has just been born into his bloodline. Inside another opulent bedroom, another newborn baby lies wrapped in white cloth, while the family observes with nothing but love and care. But back at the first baby's bedroom, his parents look upon the child with utter bitter disappointment, wishing with all their hearts that things had turned out differently. The young baby smiles innocently, completely unaware that his birth has already triggered an explosive wave of hatred within the household. Gazing at the child, the family coldly wishes he would just drop dead, forcing the crying boy to internalize a crushing sense of guilt before he can even walk. Nothing like a full-grown chud blaming a newborn. The father, with his pent-up inferiority complex, originally turned all his expectations toward his son to succeed where he failed. But things turned out differently. Being his child was born with only one arm. While the favored golden Kajin runs around the vibrant cherry blossom gardens praised by everyone, the unloved one, armed Davin, is left crying in his bed. The mother watches the unloved child crawl slowly through the grass, thinking with bitter frustration about how hopelessly behind he is compared to his prodigy rival. Even when Davin strains his fragile body to take his first steps and lift a training blade, his father only sighs, wishing Kajin were his only true son. By age 7, Davin is sent away through a harsh winter blizzard to act as a mere low-ranking attendant for his celebrated cousin. On the surface, he's framed as a supportive companion, but the cruel reality is that Kajin openly mocks him as a pathetic loser the moment they are alone. Kajin treats Davin like a personal punching bag to vent his explosive rage, blasting him back into the dirt beneath a dark, stormy sky. Battered, bruised, and spitting blood, Davin forces back his tears, entirely crushed by the fact that every adult in the family intentionally turns a blind eye to the abuse. He endures the freezing winter isolation alone, remembering that his only supportive uncle abandoned this toxic noble estate long ago. As they grow older, Kajin's monstrous talent earns him the blessing of a so-called sword god, and he ruthlessly demands the next challenger step up to get crushed. Standing on the stone training grounds, Davin watches with burning jealousy, desperately screaming internally that he wants to be strong too. Kajin catches him staring and erupts in fury, demanding to know why a one-armed loser dares to glare at his superior. Kajin brutally beats him into the stone floor, mocking the very idea that anyone could ever close the gap between a genius and an insect through mere hard work. Bloody, broken, and pinned to the dirt, Davin grits his teeth with absolute desperation, screaming that he refuses to lose. Years pass, and the lazy genius Kajin completely ruins himself with alcohol, women, and drugs, while Sigma Chad Davin grinds away through the twilight hours, sharpening his dual-blade style. Bro is on an unstoppable no-fab journey, elevating himself to a higher consciousness by not simping. Davin embraces his status as a hard-working idiot, staring back with burning crimson eyes as he vows that their positions won't stay the same forever. In a flurry of blinding slashes and heavy impact craters, Davin spends the next decade tearing through monsters and battlefield enemies alike. Midway through a massive clash under a blood-red sky, a shocked Kajin realizes he can no longer react to the sheer speed of his one-armed brother. Davin lunges through a storm of magical energy, his eyes locking onto his target with pure predatory focus as he drives a final strike home. At 29 years old, after losing countless unofficial matches, Davin finally brings the great family genius down to his knees in the middle of the ruined courtyard. The surrounding bystanders erupt in pure shock as the longtime loser stands tall, holding a blood-stained blade over his defeated brother. Kajin trembles on the shattered pavement, utterly humiliated that he just lost to the one-armed child his parents always looked down upon. Davin stands dressed in his black cloak, coldly telling Kajin that if he had been blessed with 2 arms and natural talent, he would have lived a truly meaningful life instead of wasting it away. Suddenly, a lethal surprise attack tears through the area, throwing the entire courtyard into a chaotic frenzy as the family elites ambush the victor, coughed up bloodstains. Davin's lips as he realizes Kajin used the anti-magic properties of the Direct Line's Sunblade to seal his fate, leaving him with no way to survive. Branded a monster by his own kin, Davin is stripped of his dignity, wrapped tightly in heavy bindings, and cast into the darkest depths of the family dungeon, waking up tightly, restrained to a wooden chair in a pitch-black cell. Davin stares at a heavily armored, masked executioner and wonders if he has stepped straight into hell. The executioner mocks him, stating he's incredibly lucky. A saint healed his broken body just so he could survive long enough to face his execution. Davin slumps forward in complete exhaustion, realizing his entire body is shattered and that he can barely draw breath beneath his dark hair. The guard steps closer, spinning a sickening lie that the only possible way a one-armed loser could ever beat the great Kajin was by forging a blood contract with a demon. The masked authority screams that investigators found blood sacrifices hidden under Davin's house, framing him as a devil who slaughtered 300 children just to get strong. Davin lets out a hollow laugh as the final verdict is read aloud, sentencing him to have his mana permanently sealed and to rot away in eternal torment to preserve the family's fake honor. Draped in the tattered striped uniform of a death row prisoner, the broken swordsman is dragged down the long stone corridors, left to kneel on the cold arena floor. Davin narrows his eyes through the dark shadows as a beautifully dressed, blonde-haired man approaches the iron bars. Kajin stands clad in his grand armor, smugly thanking the prisoner for giving up his reputation so that history would forever praise him as a hard-working genius sword emperor. Left to starve inside the brick prison walls, Davin struggles against the hell. Lying shirtless on the freezing stone pavement, he looks at his bloody hands and deeply regrets not dying with honor inside the combat arena. Clutching the stump of his missing arm, the dying warrior sheds tears of absolute frustration, crying out that he refuses to die in a dark hole like this. Suddenly, a massive flash of chaotic magical energy explodes throughout the prison cell, shattering the dark environment. A blinding, star-shaped streak of pure white light cuts across the black void as Davin realizes he hasn't actually crossed over into death. A sharp, furious voice snaps him back to reality as a wide crimson eye flashes with absolute authority right in front of him. Davin finds himself mid-clash with another martial artist, gasping in pure shock as a sharp phantom pain shoots through a fully intact right arm. Looking at his hands in disbelief, he wonders if this entire reality is an incredibly lucid dream, while a blonde man in a crimson cloak glares across the room. His eyes widen in total shock as the shouting opponent addresses him directly by a completely unfamiliar name, Vinchin. The blonde noble roars in a fury, demanding to know how long this useless brat plans on ignoring a senior member of the family. Instinct takes over as Davin channels blue magical energy, executing a flawless defensive maneuver that sends the aggressive opponent sliding back across the tiled floor. Realizing his new physical body moved entirely on autopilot, the blue-haired youth rubs the back of his neck, dryly apologizing that his hand slipped. The blonde attacker trembles with pure rage, screaming that a worthless trash member from the main family shouldn't dare act so incredibly arrogant. The bitter old man vows that his own son will crush him mercilessly at the upcoming tournament, projecting his unfulfilled martial arts dreams onto the youth. Turning his back, the noble warns him to wait until the assembly of true swords, leaving the newly awakened protagonist standing completely alone in the massive, sunlit hall. Slumping onto a luxurious sofa, Davin breathes a heavy sigh of relief, realizing he still hasn't woken up from this strange new life. Suddenly, a massive flood of foreign memories forces him to clutch his head in agony, revealing a tragic past where his new mother died in childbirth and his noble father completely abandoned him. He discovers that out of the 8 children born to the famous Adenka sword family, he is Vinchin, the neglected 7th child treated like an ugly duckling. The legendary one-armed warrior from 5 centuries ago has officially reincarnated into the most useless, fragile teenager of a prominent modern household. He reaches for a collection of dusty personal diaries, skimming through pages filled with agonizing self-hatred and total despair left behind by the body's previous owner. Davin realizes the ultimate irony. He was a dying man who desperately fought to live, while the teenage Vinchin was a healthy kid who desperately wished to die. A sudden, sinister presence causes the blue-haired youth to spin around, locking eyes with a shadow looming inside the dark bedroom. Demanding to know if a demon is trying to play tricks on his mind, Davin forces the entity to reveal that it is actually the original owner of this body. Swirling purple and blue, magical constructs erupt in the center of the room as a silver-haired spirit manifests, smugly telling Davin to call him Julian. Julian explains that his current presence is the result of a divine revelation, causing the reincarnated warrior to look on in absolute disbelief. Davin asks straight out if he's dealing with a literal god, prompting the smug entity to clarify that while he is technically just a minor deity, he accidentally summoned Davin's soul into the ritual instead of a spirit beast. The arrogant entity flashes a knowing smile against a cosmic background, calling this massive cosmic accident a true calling. Davin, who is now Vincent, calmly accepts his new lease on life, but quickly notices that the teenager's spiritual energy levels are dangerously low. Julian warns him that this body is fundamentally broken and prone to an early death, causing Vincent to step forward toward Julian's flurry of glowing butterflies. The young god chuckles at the swordsman's aggressive posture, telling him he is incredibly naive, before forcing a massive wave of true memories straight into his brain. A colossal pillar of white-hot electrical energy crashes down, completely flooding Vincent's consciousness with the historic truth of the outer world. The sudden mental influx shows the young teenager being brutally beaten and stepped on by the rest of the noble family elites. Vincent snaps back to reality, sweating profusely as he wonders what kind of ruthless world allows a 13-year-old child to suffer such profound trauma. Julian sits composed at the room's central table, smugly asking the reincarnated warrior if he's finally ready to sit down and listen to the deal. Vincent settles his posture, prompting the young deity to ask if he has ever heard the legendary historical tale of the archdemon Davin and the hero King Cajun. Hearing those exact names causes the protagonist's eyes to widen as his mind flashes back 500 years to a storm-swept battlefield. He remembers escaping from the high-security Samyan family prison, bloodied and battered, crawling through a stone corridor toward the light. But Julian reads the modern history books aloud, revealing a sickening lie that claims the one-armed swordsman slaughtered over 10,000 innocent children to fuel a demonic contract. Vincent grits his teeth in absolute fury as he realizes modern history has permanently branded his past life as a literal archdemon. The historical texts claim the noble Samian family righteously abandoned the one-armed monster to rot while choosing the glorious storm sword instead. While Vincent died cold and alone in a dark ditch, his treacherous brother, Cajun, was celebrated by thousands in a massive arena as the legendary hero king. Enraged by the absolute fabrication, Vincent smashes his hands down, screaming at the glowing entity to put an end to this garbage history lesson. Julian looks at him with pure curiosity, wondering why a 13-year-old kid is suddenly throwing a massive tantrum over events that happened 5 centuries ago. Vincent forces himself to calm down, listening closely as Julian explains that the hero king supposedly shed tears of sorrow after executing his corrupted brother. Julian then mentions a historic figure named Arslan, a name that instantly reminds Vincent of the bright-eyed, loyal young disciple he took under his wing centuries ago. He fondly remembers how the young boy visited his dark prison cell multiple times, crying out that he would grow up strong enough to restore his master's stolen honor. But after making that solemn oath, Arslan vanished entirely and never returned to the prison, leaving Davin to die completely alone. Julian continues the tale, revealing that Arslan grew immensely powerful, eventually turning his back on his own bloodline to uncover the hidden truth of the world. Davin's eyes light up with sudden clarity as he realizes his loyal disciple abandoned the Falker family specifically to found the brand new Adenka bloodline. The entire Adenka family was created for the sole purpose of fighting back against the world's lies and recovering Davin's lost honor. Recognizing his old student's undying loyalty, Vincent or Davin mentally thanks Arslan, vowing to take over the grand mission left behind in the family bloodline. With a newfound purpose, the blue-haired youth strides out of the bedroom alongside the hovering god, determined to climb past the nobles who betrayed him. Stepping onto the grand indoor stone arena, the protagonist prepares to test his limits, prompting Julian to call for a sparring match to begin. Vincent lunges forward with a brilliant burst of blue energy, curious to see how much stronger the current generation of martial artists has actually become. But the moment he exerts force, his knees buckle and his head spins, forcing him to realize that teenage Vincent's body is absolute garbage. He sits cross-legged, desperately focusing a brilliant aura of raw blue mana around himself, just to keep his fragile physical vessel from collapsing on the spot. Julian hovers down in absolute shock, aggressively asking the boy why on earth he never bothered to train in swordsmanship when he possesses the legendary heavenly exoskeleton. The bewildered teenager struggles against the god's grip, completely clueless as to what a heavenly exoskeleton even is. Julian sighs heavily and explains that while normal martial artists can only store their miracle-working mana inside their hearts, the rare exoskeleton, allows a person to pack energy directly into their bones. Vincent's eyes narrow in sharp realization as Julian notes that the legendary hero King Kajin was the only other person in history to possess this exact bone structure. 3ATA15 4222 JPEG 4222 JPEG. Vincent stands inside a glowing portal of light, realizing the massive historical irony of inheriting his mortal enemy's unique anatomical advantage. Julian sits back, explaining that modern martial artists now utilize a completely different concept called imagery to create a magical storage unit for their mana. Vincent looks on in total disbelief, completely stunned to hear that the world has entirely abandoned the traditional method of direct body meditation. Julian clarifies that modern warriors store mana in internal constructs called stars, completely erasing the old physical heart storage methods from the historical records. Vincent realizes this modern shift was created to eliminate the massive lethality rate of the past, where over half of all martial artists died from exploding hearts during training. Unwilling to change his ways, the ancient warrior raises his glowing blade, declaring that a real master must be willing to risk their life for true power. He lets his raw mana erupt wildly across the training room, sending crackling blue lightning bolts directly toward the terrified young deity. When Julian screams at him for letting his energy run rampant, Vincent casually responds that a 50% survival rate sounds like a perfectly decent gamble. The god begs him to stop being so reckless with a priceless vessel, explaining that Vincent's magic power circuits are naturally top tier due to his rare birth trait. The core issue is that this starving exoskeleton has been completely deprived of raw mana for 13 straight years, meaning the boy will literally drop dead before reaching adulthood if left unchecked. Staring at the glowing blue runes beneath his feet, Vincent confidently declares that a remaining lifespan of 10 years is more than enough time for him to conquer this family. Suddenly, a frantic banging rattles the bedroom door as a senior household servant aggressively shouts that he's bursting into the room. The servant storms across the threshold and stops dead in his tracks, looking absolutely disgusted by the chaotic mess of shattered furniture and scattered clothes. Vincent glances up coldly, asking the arrogant man straight to his face if he is supposed to be his personal attendant. The servant scoffs at the question, but internally freezes in pure panic, noticing that the usually weak young master suddenly radiates a terrifying physical pressure. The attendant points aggressively at the debris, demanding to know what kind of freakish, forbidden experiment the boy was conducting inside his locked room. Vincent lets out a dark chuckle, openly mocking the servant for speaking with formal words, while displaying the most impertinent attitude imaginable. Locking his burning crimson eyes onto the guard, the young lord drops the room's temperature, coldly commanding the defiant servant to remember his place and go fetch him clean clothes. When the terrified attendant refuses to move, Vincent casually shrugs, stating he will simply walk out bare-chested to get the garments directly from the Grand Chamberlain. Terrified of the severe political fallout, the servant completely breaks, frantically waving his hands as he agrees to clean the entire room himself. Vincent stands tall amidst the fading magical energy, noting that it's high time he teaches this household exactly what the 7th young lord of Adenka is capable of. He turns back to the trembling servant, locking eyes with a cold glare as he whispers that a true killer radiates an undeniable aura. An aura he knows intimately because he lived that exact bloody life. The wooden door carves open to a frantic shout calling for the young master. Wilson enters the chamber presenting the washed clothes, confidently asking Vincent if he likes how the room was cleaned, before pleading with him not to turn his living quarters into a battlefield next time. Outside, onlookers mockingly whisper about how Vincent has suddenly become more submissive, wondering what a useless person like him can even do. Unfazed by the gossip, Vincent commands Wilson to fetch a 1-meter wooden sword weighing about 500 grams made of black scented wood, noting there should be tons of them in the family storeroom. Wilson defiantly asks what would happen if he refuses, prompting Vincent to stand his ground and counter that he will simply go get it himself. Vincent reminds a hesitant Wilson that the storeroom gatekeepers hold absolute loyalty to the direct descendants of the family, forcing the frantic assistant to urgently tell him to hold on for a second. Mid-training in a ruined structure, a sudden clash prompts a violent reaction before Vincent offers a pained apology about having bad memories of being attacked from behind, telling the subordinate to keep that in mind from now on. Vincent grips his torso in severe discomfort as his body screams in absolute pain just from doing that basic movement. Vincent lets out a sharp exhale and aggressively asks the hesitant onlooker if they have something to say, leaving them stuttering in silence. Confronting the servant, Vincent mockingly asks if he didn't just claim he didn't want to do the task, right as a massive impact echoes through the grand hall. Vincent smiles smugly at the servant, calling him a little rascal, and noting that he didn't even say anything yet. With steps echoing heavily, the young master walks toward the massive double doors, staring ahead with burning intensity as he hardens his inner resolve that he must never lose to him anymore. Vincent turns and asks Wilson if he knew anyone who lacked his right arm and led an incredibly tough life that ultimately faced a very terrible ending. Wilson respectfully hands over the requested training weapon, leaving Vincent to internally curse at how deeply embarrassing his current physical state is. The heavy wooden doors click shut, and Vincent tightly grips the staff in a stylized void, declaring that he needs some proper training. The title card marks the beginning of Chapter 5, as Vincent bursts forward in a blur of high-speed motion lines. Clashing hard in the training arena, Vincent acknowledges that his heavenly exoskeleton is extremely weak. However, a confident smile breaks across his face as he realizes the internal sensation feels amazing and that he was born to be a martial artist. A sudden magical strike cuts across the grounds, prompting an arrogant newcomer to offer a full apology, claiming he didn't think anyone was out here because the mana footprint was so incredibly weak. Standing proudly in fantasy combat attire, the blonde youth introduces himself as Revan Adenka, before directly mocking the protagonist, asking if he's that useless Vincent. Vincent stares back in silence as the narrator reveals that Revan is a highly talented descendant from the Collateral Branch family line. The narrator notes, Revan is a top candidate to win the upcoming Assembly of True Swords, while onlookers question if Vincent remembers meeting the boy's father previously. A stern warning goes out to be careful around Revan, describing him as the most skilled 13-year-old rising star in the entire family, just as the banner for the Assembly of True Swords takes center stage. Vincent listens intently as the tournament rules are detailed, explaining it gathers children of connected martial families to fight with real swords, with the ultimate winner earning a chance to fight a direct descendant of the same age. Revan steps forward aggressively, taunting Vincent by asking if he's going to hide out of fear, letting out a loud burst of arrogant laughter before Vincent calmly tells him that he needs to learn how to talk better. Vincent sharply rebukes the boy, stating that provocation should have dignity and class, reminding him that the legendary one-armed Davin was deeply respected by everyone, and that cutting away at another's training scarecrow makes him a total shame to all martial artists. Vincent targets Revan's lineage, questioning if his Collateral Branch father taught him those terrible manners, driving Revan into a blind rage as he screams about the insult to his father and vows never to forgive him. Revan's massive blade extends diagonally in the dark, as he seethes with an intense sense of inferiority from being raised in a branch family. Vincent notes that Revan deliberately tried to harm him using mana, despite knowing he cannot control it, internally lamenting that modern martial artists have severely regressed compared to those from 500 years ago. Energy violently erupts around Revan as he points his blade forward, leaving Vincent to wonder if this fool is seriously drawing a weapon against him, despite knowing he can't even perform imagery combat. Vincent senses a bizarre vibe from the incoming glowing sword and steps back, calmly telling Revan that they should stop right here. Vincent raises his basic training weapon, taunting Revan that if he's getting this scared over a mere wooden sword, things won't end well for him at the Assembly of True Swords, where real blades are drawn. Revan's face twists into a snarl as he lunges with absolute lethal intent, roaring that he will kill him here today as a massive explosion shatters the area. Revan drives his blade forward in a blind fury, screaming his death threat as the massive shockwave forces Vincent into a heavy defensive posture. Bystanders violently rush into the arena, shouting for the young master to stop because he absolutely cannot fight with Vincent right now. The intervening allies breathe a sigh of relief and warn Revan that injuring Vincent now would only give the main family an excuse to dodge a fight, prompting them to officially declare that they will settle this blood feud at the Assembly of True Swords. The title card shifts to Chapter 6, as Julian heavily lectures Vincent about why he taunted Revan, while Vincent calmly crosses his arms, stating he was merely teaching a lesson to a disrespectful child. Julian spreads his arms wide, explaining his grand tactical plan to flashily summon a powerful Spirit King at the tournament, while Vincent ignores him to look at a detailed portrait in an open book. Julian snaps him back to reality to focus on image theory, explaining that traits are artificially created using analyzed power derived from divine blessings. Vincent looks up in utter shock to ask if blessings can truly be duplicated, before inquiring if Revan's signature trait is the one known as Steelman, a massive projection of a glowing blue armored warrior appears as Julian explains that Steelman is a medium-level trait specializing in high defense and immense destructive power, prompting Vincent to realize their martial education is entirely skewed toward raw physical attributes. Inspecting a cleanly sliced straw scarecrow, Vincent notes that Revan's physical achievements are monstrously advanced for someone his age, bracing himself for what it will take to compete against geniuses like this. A loud boom echoes through the courtyard as Vincent continues his high-speed training strikes, drawing irritated murmurs from onlookers who notice he's practicing out in the open again. The crowd is abruptly ordered to stop spouting nonsense as the red-haired Vice Captain Merlin of the White Sword Unit arrives, forcing the gossiping family members to bow and apologize. Merlin stares intently at the training grounds, noting that while others whisper about Vincent being the absolute shame of the Adenka family, the young master's eyes tell a completely different story. Amidst swirling magical energy, Vincent declares that he is completely used to being looked down upon, but highlights that he has always converted criticism into praise and will absolutely do it again. Merlin steps forward and presents a glowing cyan bottle, explaining it is an advanced recovery potion that will make her brutal training routine much easier to endure. Vincent suspiciously asks if the officer isn't secretly laughing at him, but Merlin honestly admits that while he did at first, the desperate look of dedication in the young master's eyes changed his mind. Vincent confidently asserts that anyone who laughs at a dedicated martial artist is the one who deserves to be mocked, before politely dismissing the officer from his patrol duty, leaving Merlin noting that something has deeply changed within the boy. Vincent unleashes a barrage of rapid-fire sword strikes against a training post, downing the recovery potion to keep his breaking body moving through the intense exhaustion. Julian watches from a stack of books as Vincent focuses on his form, mentally reminding himself to balance firmly with his right foot on the ground while maximizing the rotation of his hip. Studying the historic martial paths of one-armed Davin, Vincent visualizes a sword path layered with complex dots and lines to manifest his true abilities, striking hard right now. A massive shockwave shatters the air with a loud crack as Vincent celebrates that the imagery technique successfully worked, leaving a clean, perfect cut sliced through the void. The next morning, an exhausted attendant carrying a large serving tray aggressively complains about how many days this grueling routine has been going on, noting the young master isn't a rooster who wakes up at 5 in the morning. A sinister figure smiles in the dark, vowing to completely screw the young master over just as the butler arrives at the door to announce that breakfast is officially served. Looking down at a plate of horribly low-quality porridge and cheap greens, Vincent stares in cold silence before directly confronting the butler, telling him that if he wanted to steal funds for himself, he shouldn't have made it this obvious or forgotten to wipe his mouth. Vincent watches the corrupt household administrator walk away, sternly warning him that while he can look past it as cute for now, he better not cross the line. The corrupt employee smirks nervously, reminding Vincent of his past as a ruthless backstreet gangster, but Vincent shrugs him off since he was more of a backstreet boy than an actual gangster. The corrupt administrator is frightened now, being under Vincent's aura, the administrator to nervously agree. Vincent looks the corrupt man dead in the eye, telling him he must choose whether he wants to be ruled by fear or pledge absolute loyalty, leaving the cornered worker stuttering in a complete panic. Standing proudly like an ancient warrior, Vincent delivers a powerful declaration about unmatched dominance that leaves the administrator's heart thumping in pure awe at his explosive charm. In a grand hall, a magical duel concludes with a sharp whoosh as guards note that Master Vincent has apparently retired early for the day. Merlin walks up to the training grounds and inspects a cleanly sliced scarecrow prop, asking in utter shock if the young master did this with a real blade, only to realize Vincent has exclusively been practicing with standard wooden swords. Staring at the impossibly smooth, perfect surface of the cut wood, Merlin stands completely stunned, wondering aloud what kind of high-tier martial art the young master is truly practicing. The narrative transitions to Chapter 7, as Vincent stands gracefully in flowing white robes, reviewing household documents while a servant frantically moves in the background. Reviewing financial data, Vincent notes the household staff has become awfully polite, before holding up the fabric of his uniform and pointing out that it is made of cheap levadine cotton. Vincent highlights that the food quality is abysmally low compared to the massive family budget, directly deducing that someone is systematically embezzling household funds. A sudden transition cuts to an explosive combat simulation, where a warrior lets out a heavy sigh of exhaustion after obliterating a simulated threat with a massive glowing weapon. In a flashback to the earlier confrontation, Vincent mockingly asks why Revan is so terrified of a simple wooden sword, driving Revan to spit blood and aggressively lunge forward, shouting to ask who exactly is scared. Back in the present, a wealthy noble approaches a shirtless, heavily breathing Revan at the training grounds, noting that his physical conditioning is coming along exceptionally well. Revan's father looks at him with absolute seriousness, warning him that there is very little time left before the tournament and that he must defeat Vincent if they ever want to escape a life of branch family poverty. The desperate father aggressively commands his son that he must become the one branch member to completely topple the main family, leaving Revan quietly complying while noting his father's obsession is worsening by the day. Clenching his fists under a starry sky, Revan's eyes burn with desperate longing as he vows that if he just beats that bastard Vincent, everything can finally go back to the way it used to be. Back in the study, Vincent and Julian review a massive influx of data, analyzing not just the opponent's personal files, but their specific combat techniques and physical habits. Looking at a glowing mana crystal diagram, Julian notes the original plan was a flashy tournament debut using a Spirit King, but a confident Vincent counters that it would be a complete disgrace as a martial artist to lose with this much information at his disposal. Vincent promises Julian a far more valuable victory than a Spirit King, before loudly calling for Wilson to enter the room. Wilson bows respectfully and asks what the matter is, prompting Vincent to slide a stack of highly detailed financial documents forward, stating there is a critical task he needs handled immediately. Armed with the incriminating papers, Wilson nervously knocks on the Grand Administration doors, requesting entry to see the household authority figure, Grand Chamberlain. Ray also looks up from a large wooden desk with sharp purple eyes, sternly demanding that the intruder state his business as a powerful 7-star aura fills the room. Leveraging Vincent's authority as a direct descendant, the messenger delivers a high-stakes demand, requesting that the Patriarch personally attend and observe the assembly of true swords, so the young master can officially prove his worth. Rayasa's face twists into anger as he realizes this sudden tournament request is the direct political cost of his budget embezzlement, leaving him demanding to know what was just said. Rayasa dismisses the messenger, realizing Vincent purposely sent a proxy to aggressively flaunt his noble authority and threaten him indirectly rather than coming himself. A massive shockwave clears in the Grand Palace Hall as Rayasa approaches the head of the clan, formally delivering the young master's official tournament invitation. An elite official tells Rayasa to cease this pointless behavior, but the Patriarch leans forward with an imposing presence, questioning if Vincent truly possesses the martial skill to speak of the worth of his lineage. Rayasa bows his head respectfully, confirming that the young master has firmly promised to put on an absolute show and prove his true worth to the main family line this time. Cornered by the threat of his massive financial corruption being exposed to the High Council, Grand Chamberlain Rayasa completely backs down and states his deep apologies. An armored official looks on with a touch of disdain, noting that this ruthless high-stakes method is exactly like her, forcing the administration to officially concede the political match. The preliminary matches of the tournament explode into a flurry of heavy action as brutal physical strikes tear through the stone coliseum. The crowd lets out a massive roar as Revan stands in the stone arena, confidently telling an arriving Vincent to brace himself right as the crowd gasps in shock at the sudden arrival of Patriarch Khan. Revan's eyes flash with absolute arrogance, declaring that the supreme head of the clan is clearly here to watch his spectacular performance as the rising star of the collateral descendants. Revan easily tears through his bracket with rapid-fire action, aggressively unleashing a powerful energy strike that sends his opponent flying across the pavement. The blonde prodigy swings his massive blade through a cloud of debris, confidently yelling at his opponents not to get conceited because their reckless attacks can never pierce his specialized steelman attribute. A jubilant shout echoes from the branch family seats, praising Revan's dominant performance and solidifying his title as the undisputed rising star. Vincent crosses his arms calmly, internally noting that while these modern fighters would be considered absolute geniuses by standard metrics, their actual martial arts possess close to zero depth. Revan points his heavy sword forward, shouting that he gives Vincent credit for not running away, prompting a smug Vincent to mockingly tell him to climb up quickly because he isn't going anywhere. The crowd erupts into a total frenzy as the referee steps forward, officially concluding the bracket and declaring Revan Adenka the undisputed victor. Standing proudly on the stone floor, Revan formally issues his challenge to face the direct descendant, and a smiling Vincent steps into the arena to accept. Vincent turns to Wilson, and calmly outlines an insane, self-imposed handicap, declaring he will use only a basic wooden sword, fight exclusively with his left hand, and grant his opponent the first 3 open attacks. The stadium erupts into total disbelief, as spectators question if the young lord has gone completely mad, while angry branch family members shout that he's just setting up cheap excuses for when he inevitably loses. The patriarch commands silence from the high box, officially allowing the bizarre conditions, and telling Vincent he better prove those arrogant words with direct action. The referee raises his hand to signal both sides to get ready, officially shouting for the high-stakes match to start. Revan lunges forward with a massive, high-speed strike, furiously roaring for Vincent to die while standing still as he tests how long the direct descendant can act this conceited. The heavy blade flashes in a rapid downward arc, as Revan aggressively screams that he's completely caught him out. Relying purely on spatial reading, Vincent calmly guides his left hand, internally noting that Revan's movements are so incredibly obvious that great swords are simply never meant for stabbing maneuvers. With a sharp clang, Vincent effortlessly parries the massive blow with a fragile piece of wood without using an ounce of mana, calmly reminding a shocked Revan that he is officially allowed 2 attacks already. Revan's face twists into pure rage, screaming at the protagonist not to dare act cocky just because he learned some petty defensive tricks. Revan unleashes a furious, rapid-fire 3rd strike, channeling his high destructive power to smash his blade low to the ground with a massive boom. A bright flash of purple energy slices across the stone floor as Vincent effortlessly sidesteps the heavy trajectory, calmly announcing that the final 3rd attack is officially completed. Vincent takes a singular focused stance with his wooden sword, declaring aloud that he will now keep his solemn promise to Julian and his father as his turn to attack begins. A sudden whoosh cuts through the arena as spectators stand up in an absolute panic, screaming for an immobilized Revan to get up and stop struggling against an opponent who can't even utilize mana. Onlookers look on in absolute disbelief as Vincent delivers a stern lecture, stating that standing there completely dumbfounded just because one lacks a blade is not the true way of a martial artist. Vincent steps into a perfect defensive path, warning that his opponent's reckless shenanigans will officially end right here. A massive strike echoes through the stadium with a loud boom as Vincent executes a flawless, high-speed rotation. Revan looks down in brief confusion at his own body, noting that the strike didn't even hurt, before letting out an arrogant laugh about the massive gap between their natural talents. Vincent seamlessly utilizes the residual force of the opponent's own heavy strike to position himself perfectly mid-air. Calling out to the referee, Vincent acknowledges he only has one single shot at this high-tier skill before his unconditioned body completely collapses under the physical strain. Erupting with a brilliant flash of purple energy, Vincent tracks the airborne target with heightened vision, shouting that he can see the exact trajectory perfectly. The mysterious imagery combat technique manifests, creating a flawless sword path connecting hidden dots and lines directly through the open void. The narrator calls it the supreme art he completely mastered, as Vincent calls out to Julian to watch the execution of the absolute sword slash. The wooden sword cuts cleanly into the void, completely reverting the flow of mana to seamlessly sever the opponent's specialized skill and everything lying beyond it. A horrific scream of absolute agony echoes through the Colosseum as Revan hits the ruined pavement, clutching his mangled body while weeping about his missing arm. Vincent stands tall over the blood-stained stone floor, directly demanding to know why the terrified referee is just standing there instead of declaring the final result. The referee freezes in total horror before raising his flag to officially announce that the undisputed victor of the match is Vincent Adenka. Vincent turns his gaze toward the high balcony, directly asking the commanding patriarch if he has officially kept his solemn promise to prove his true worth. The patriarch commands the victorious youth to come forward inside the grand hall, formally awarding him with the rare, highly coveted miracle stone crystal as his true reward. A furious, defeated branch family member falls to his knees, screaming in absolute denial that this impossible victory doesn't make any sense and has to be a cheap trick. High officials whisper about the absolute structural brilliance of the kid's physical strike, confirming that the severed limb was sliced so perfectly clean that it cannot be reattached by standard means. The priests deliver a grim diagnosis regarding the severe dual injuries, stating that Revan's right arm cannot be reattached. Furious at the news, Charles screams in absolute disbelief, accusing the priests of sheer incompetence for failing to fix his son's arm. Vincent steps forward amidst the tense assembly hall, calmly asking to respond since the patriarch has already declared him the final victor. When challenged, Vincent fiercely questions if Charles believes his own insights surpass the patriarch's, promptly ordering Zeron of the White Sword Unit to arrest him. Charles roars in fury at the direct descendant's defiance, but Zeron complies immediately, pinning the enraged uncle who desperately struggles to break free. The patriarch commands order, sternly reminding Charles that Adenka's law does not try twice for the same crime, and highlighting his deep debt to Vincent. Allowing the outburst to slide strictly out of paternal sympathy, the patriarch signals an end to the matter, while Vincent quietly bows and thanks the patriarch. The immediate threat passes, but Revan remains prone on the ground, completely distraught over the permanent loss of his right arm. Vincent turns to the shocked priest, asking directly if the severed limb could be completely restored, using a legendary miracle stone. Acknowledging that he was the one who severed the arm in combat, Vincent gets the patriarch's approval to proceed with the critical choice. The air crackles with dense energy as the older priest demands a reflection worthy of a true martial artist before deploying the artifact. Vincent maintains a cold, disdainful glare, muttering about an eye for an eye while recognizing that his defeated opponent is already fully conscious. Terrified of failure, Charles desperately screams that he will sacrifice his own right arm instead, grinding his teeth in pure panic. Vincent notes the father's genuine affection, while Charles braces himself, mentally crying out that he must endure this trial for Revan's sake. With a booming roar, a brilliant flash of pink and red light erupts across the grand chamber as the execution strike is unleashed. Zeron moves like lightning through the flashing blue streaks of energy, cleanly intercepting the blade and forcing Charles back onto the stone pavement. Stepping back with his unsheathed sword, Zeron advises the uncle to save that raw courage for a better cause, reporting to the patriarch that the matter is resolved. The patriarch commends Vincent and reveals the glittering, multifaceted miracle stone, which glows intensely between their cupped hands. Vincent urgently tells the high priest to act, prompting a desperate prayer to Gaia, the goddess of healing, to grant them divine mercy. A powerful magical resonance echoes through the hall, drawing shocked gasps as the divine energy begins interacting with Revan's ruined arm. Julian watches the intense exchange with an emotional, lingering sadness, while Vincent stands firmly by the heavy wooden doors. Astonished by his resolve, the onlookers think he is incredibly cool, while Vincent tells them they must choose between being ruled by fear or pledging true loyalty. The crowd passionately declares that loyalty is much cooler, internalizing the lesson as a brutal impact echoes across the memory of the battlefield. Back at the estate, an enthusiastic servant brightly greets the young master, noting that dinner preparations will begin shortly. Julian talks defensively about drawing something much larger, turning in surprise when Vincent walks behind the main counter. A formal guest arrives at the grand room, introducing himself respectfully as Dullan, a dedicated priest who worships Gaia. Dullan bows low to express his profound gratitude for the previous matter, leaving Julian staring in complete and utter shock. Dullan reflects on his original calling to heal the helpless, admitting that Vincent's willingness to give up the hard-won prize completely shattered his preconceptions. Extending his hands in deep reverence, the priest presents a special gift, thanking the young master for forcing them to reflect upon their actions. Vincent casually dismisses the praise, but Dullan insists he accept a highly intricate wooden token carved with radiant solar patterns. Julian gasps in disbelief upon noticing the emblem, shouting that Dullan is actually a powerful second-class priest capable of granting unlimited temple privileges. Dullan smiles warmly, stating he learned a valuable lesson before taking his leave through the massive gridded windows. Julian playfully teases his brother about securing a reward, far superior to their previous assets, shifting the conversation toward an upcoming family event. He notes that while their father usually dines in total isolation, the second-born sister, Dea, has also been stirring up waves with her martial prowess. Julian nervously asks if that grand gathering might happen tonight, while Vincent stretches his stiff muscles, knowing he cannot afford to rest. Julian continues pacing anxiously until an urgent shout echoes through the corridor, shattering the calm atmosphere. A distressed guard trembles violently, gasping out that the patriarch has formally called for the young master's immediate presence. Julian stands stunned by the perfect timing, while Vincent remains completely unbothered, his mind fixed on his ultimate goals. Vincent marches deliberately into the massive, cathedral-like hall, where a regal woman adorned with orange flowers steps forward to welcome him. Greeting his stepmother directly, Vincent offers a polite thank you as the heavy energy of the room intensifies around them. She calmly commands him to follow because his father is waiting, leading the young man deeper into the opulent gold-accented chambers. The patriarch sits rigidly beneath the baroque molding, uttering Vincent's name as an intense, glowing purple eye activates to scrutinize him. Vincent clutches his chest as a wave of invisible, crushing pressure washes over him, realizing this interrogation is far more severe than his daytime matches. The patriarch questions the sudden exertion of force, while the mother stands somberly in her white robes, nodding in silent agreement. Surrounded by crystalline magical energy, the patriarch notes that the test is meant to verify the validity of Charles's previous accusations. A memory flashes of Charles shouting in total rage, insisting that an injury of that scale could never be resolved through proper martial methods without deception. Vincent winces against the radiating pressure, his eyes flashing as a massive spiritual impact reverberates through his core. Sweating under the intense crimson glow, Vincent senses an awful feeling, realizing they are investigating the terrifying possibility of him being an apostle. The mother observes him closely, pointing out that his unique style is strikingly similar to the legendary Hero King's long-recorded swordsmanship. Vincent suppresses his frustration regarding this fabricated history, recalling how that ancient sword was said to have subdued the archdemon Davin. Stepping closer with a piercing glare, the mother demands to know exactly where her son managed to learn such profound martial arts. Standing firmly against the ominous crimson backdrop, the mother repeats her demanding question, pressing the young master for a straight answer. Vincent realizes his father is completely silent, letting the mother command the entire interrogation with her terrifying gaze. Julian panics internally, mentally screaming for his brother to remain silent because her eyes can effortlessly discern truth from lies. Vincent maintains absolute composure under the immense strain, bracing himself as if standing before a colossal beast mid-strike. The mother smiles knowingly amidst the red light, prompting him to speak without further hesitation. Vincent resolves to take the first step past his constraints, carefully preparing to frame his response as a divine revelation. The mother looks skeptical, questioning how he could receive such a profound blessing without any traditional holy ceremonies. Vincent remains unfazed, suggesting that if she finds his rapid growth suspicious, she can easily verify his standing directly with the temple. He gestures toward the connection, confirming he received the sacred relic as a direct gift from Dullen, proving his words carry no falsehood. The mother presses on, asking directly if he truly mastered those complex sword movements solely through a sudden revelation. Vincent explains that he's been deciphering mysterious movements for a long time, driven by a desperate desire to change and finally prove his worth. He adds that he fiercely wanted to show his rising strength to his critical relatives and, most importantly, to his commanding father. The patriarch rubs his chin thoughtfully in the shadows before leaning forward to deliver his official verdict. He commands Vincent to continue training his unique martial arts, fully aware of the dangerous similarities to the ancient archdemon's power. The patriarch notes that if word gets out, rival families will immediately make a massive fuss and claim the Anicaps stole their techniques. The mother confirms she has already weighed all necessary risks, noting that since the patriarch gave his approval, he bears full responsibility. Vincent bows his head, acknowledging the gravity of the ruling, while his father praises his spectacular performance at the tournament. The patriarch offers to grant him any single reward he desires, to which Vincent replies simply that he wants to become stronger. Julian urgently whispers for him to request entry into the restricted library, but the patriarch notes that only 3-star martial artists with hearts linked to imagery may pass. Vincent confidently admits he lacks traditional imagery, prompting the patriarch to alter the reward entirely. He bestows a legendary heirloom embedded in a swirling aura of red and orange light, revealing the glowing sword known as the Crimson Lotus. Vincent claims the historic weapon, which carries the very legacy of the Adenka family line. Later, Vincent encounters a battered and defeated figure, smirking as he tells him it is far too early to be satisfied with this level of success. He declares that they will accomplish much greater deeds in the future, prompting a deep sense of mutual trust as they prepare to depart. The mother stops Vincent in the courtyard, proudly acknowledging his extreme efforts before instructing him to prepare for the customs of the Crimson Fortress. Vincent gazes at the glowing crystalline seals of the institution, admitting his immediate plans remain unformed. The mother warns that his body must be in immense pain from overusing those strange movements, stating, "It is impossible to defeat the Crimson Demon with a single track." Vincent thanks his mother for the stern warning, confidently promising he will not let her down before walking away from the palace steps. Left behind, she laments that he departed without asking for the demon's specific traits. Marveling at his absolute lack of hesitation, she watches him go, whispering a quiet message to an absent soul about their son taking a massive step forward. At the trading grounds, an older servant loudly promises absolute support, causing a panicked ally to shout in suspicion. They stumble upon Siri, who is busy handling a mountain of laundry and looks up in utter disbelief at the sudden commotion. Siri proudly declares that since her young master has transformed, she must change as well, brushing off local gossip about his status. Meanwhile, inside the grand, towering shelves of the restricted library, Vincent frantically sifts through old documents. He reacts with shock upon realizing that all records from exactly 500 years ago have been systematically removed from the archives. Determined to free himself from his limitations, Vincent ponders alternative training methods, since traditional imagery remains completely inaccessible to his heart. Julian watches him anxiously, mentally debating the impossible, world-shattering secret of his brother's true identity. Vincent firmly refuses to back down, turning to a hesitant Julian to make a definitive declaration about his power. Julian demands a repetition as a surge of red magical energy flares, leaving the surrounding environment heavily rattled. Julian backs away in emotional exhaustion, while Vincent suddenly notices a strange, glowing blue script hidden within the mana texts. They pull out a bizarre grimoire that seems totally out of place, reading through a sequence of highly unconventional, ancient training notes. The text reveals a staggering truth. A past warrior managed to manifest an overwhelming flow of mana by completely throwing away traditional imagery theory. A vivid visualization of deep cosmic currents and vibrant magenta energy flows fills the pages, outlining the absolute freedom of unrestricted mana. Julian stares in pure shock, realizing they have discovered an actual historical record of someone stacking immense mana without using a single image. Despite Julian's frantic warnings about the extreme physical danger, Vincent insists on testing the lethal method immediately. They are suddenly interrupted by a shocked arrival, prompting Vincent to inquire about the stranger's identity. He recognizes a loyal maid who previously showed unyielding affection to his former, good-for-nothing persona, validating her quiet relief. As she wells up with emotion, the brothers awkwardly debate how to console her before turning toward the courtyard steps. A commanding figure draped in red combat gear appears at the entrance, prompting a startled cry as Revan steps into full view. The atmosphere inside the blue-paneled hall turns instantly rigid as Revan gazes deliberately into a nearby mirror. While a servant nervously offers refreshments to break the ice, Revan grips his silver sword tightly, his eyes blazing with intense focus. Facing Vincent directly against a backdrop of radiating purple energy, Revan firmly announces he is here to settle his moral debt from the tournament. Lunging forward mid-combat, Revan unleashes his blade to demonstrate his resolved spirit and absolute martial commitment. Vincent quickly evaluates the slash, turning sharply to order Sari to evacuate the immediate area for her own safety. Sari protests in deep distress, while Revan drops his weapon, openly acknowledging the immense sacrifice of the miracle stone that saved his life. Kneeling in his bright red robes, Revan confesses his past cowardice and expresses profound regret for his family's selfish actions. Placing his sword flat on the polished floor, Revan looks up with absolute sincerity and solemnly swears his eternal loyalty to Vincent. Julian gasps in complete shock at the sight, while Vincent smiles, recognizing that placing a sword forward represents a life-or-death martial commitment. Vincent accepts the profound oath, using the strategic alliance to form a brilliant plan for their upcoming advancement. Gazing at the unsheathed heirloom, Revan notices the unmistakable form of the Crimson Lotus, realizing Vincent has already secured the Patriarch's total trust. Sari watches in awe from the background, while Julian marvels at how drastically his brother has truly changed. The scene shifts to the main hall, where the elders discuss Vincent's upcoming enrollment and the looming Crimson Demon conquest. The mother reiterates the lethal stakes, explaining that the demon has no physical form and can strictly be harmed using 3-star mana or higher. Meanwhile, at the guest house, Revan remains stationed beside Vincent, whose bare torso glows faintly with complex magic circuits. Preparing to unlock the Dwarf King's blessing traits, Vincent asks Revan for his direct assistance in the dangerous training process. He explains that Revan must meditate right beside him to steady the flow, emphasizing that the agonizing trial requires trusting him completely with his life. Revan accepts his secondary role without pride, as swirling purple energy wraps around Vincent, drawing tears of immense physical strain from his eyes. Julian screams at them to stop rushing, scolding his brother for constantly pushing past normal human limits. Vincent roars back that this is his chosen path, insisting that one must violently risk the dangers ahead to achieve true power. A massive blast of magical energy erupts, enveloping Vincent's cross-legged body in blinding, interconnected purple lines as he desperately channels the flow. Julian yells in pure terror that they are going to die, but a catastrophic burst of residual energy shatters the chamber walls. Emerging from the radiant white release, Vincent flashes a triumphant grin, shouting that he finally succeeded. The smoke clears to reveal Revan panting heavily on the floor, completely exhausted by the sheer force of the breakthrough. In the main palace, the Patriarch questions the standard half-year timeline required for a normal martial artist to prepare for the demon trial. With a stern, commanding glare, the Patriarch issues a brutal ultimatum, ordering the attendants to tell Vincent to defeat the Crimson Demon within exactly 1 month. Vincent receives the impossible deadline with a sharp gasp, setting the stage for his ultimate graduation test. The authoritative messenger arrives in the grand hallway to deliver a direct decree from the Patriarch, alerting young Master Vincent that his time is rapidly running out. An unexpected visitor calls out to check if the young master is inside the palace walls, while a brutal battle rages on elsewhere. The Grand Chamberlain steps into the ornate room and demands a swift explanation for the chaotic aftermath, forcing a smug Vincent to claim he was simply meditating. Companions look on in absolute disbelief, whispering that a simple meditation session could never leave someone in such a state. The formal announcement is laid down stating that Vincent must subjugate the Crimson Demon and pass his trial within 1 single month, a forced timeline his father has never imposed before. The Guardian promises to personally accompany him in 1 month, leaving allies panicking because mastering the necessary techniques typically takes twice that long. An anxious warning rings out, telling the young master not to push past his physical limits, forcing Vincent to give a solemn promise to stay safe. A sudden realization hits as massive amounts of raw mana leak into the surrounding chamber, causing a tense standoff between the men, standing amidst the tiled hall. The strategists conclude that a mere month is insufficient, and they must immediately seek an alternative path. Vincent sits cross-legged as intricate glowing lines map across his chest, prompting him to urgently ask Revan if this is the correct circuit. Having successfully forced the energy flow to accelerate his breakthrough, Vincent boldly declares they will bypass the month-long wait entirely and shatter his father's expectations. 2 weeks pass before the party ventures deep into the lush wilderness to put their dangerous training to the ultimate test. Anxious about a repeat explosion, Vincent urges Revan to step back for his own safety, but his loyal companion refuses to miss the moment of victory. Electric energy patterns instantly activate around Vincent's palms as he signals the start of the intense trial. A massive shockwave tears through the forest floor, leaving the team disoriented as an unexpected presence suddenly shifts the atmosphere. A towering, heavily armored warrior materializes amidst a cascade of deep energy streaks, radiating a formidable power that shakes the landscape. The team nervously questions if this giant is truly the fabled Dwarf King, right before the entity swings a massive glowing weapon downward. The combatants are thrown into defensive postures as vertical beams of blinding light slice through the dense forest canopy. Vincent holds his ground with deep concentration, successfully managing a massive circular construct of warm energy right before his eyes. An excited smile breaks out across the clearing as the allies realize he successfully secured the legendary blessing in less than a month. The giant entity fades into the twilight sky, leaving Vincent with the exact trait needed to withstand the crushing burden of his absolute sword slash. 2 days later, Vincent addresses the Grand Chamberlain near the transport vehicle, explicitly stating his choice to leave early and surpass his father's goals. The supervisor reminds him of the high stakes, warning that no direct descendant has ever stumbled or failed to pass this ancestral trial. Vincent calmly tells the supervisor not to fret as a massive clash erupts on the horizon. The pressure mounts heavily on the younger descendants as the weight of the family line's perfect trial record looms over them. Vincent maintains absolute confidence against his armored opponent while traveling through the rough outdoor terrain. Upon arrival, the instructors ask if the young masters have researched their target, noting that high-level mana is required just to stand a chance. Vincent confidently retorts that the Crimson Demon happens to be the very first beast he ever subjugated. The The conversation takes a sharp, confrontational turn as direct accusations regarding family budget embezzlement are hurled across the room. A wave of intense scrutiny fills the space as they suspect weaknesses were purposefully shown to manipulate the situation. Dismissing the tension with a calm shrug, Vincent stands tall and announces their official arrival at the destination. The companions step out onto the uneven dirt and confirm they are looking directly at the ancient ruins known as the Old Temple. Weapons are drawn, and magical fields ignite as the group prepares to breach the dimensional portal ahead. Breaching the spherical barrier, the party comes face to face with a massive, cloaked figure lunging to the crumbling stone ruins. Vincent commands the Grand Chamberlain to watch closely and accurately report how he proves his true worth to the family line. The battle ignites instantly as a sword strike rains down with immense force, prompting cries to dodge and find an immediate opening. Vincent lunges straight into close-quarters combat, driving his glowing blade directly toward the tattered monster looming over him. A fierce clash of steel blocks the enemy's scythe swing, sending purple and blue light streaks detonating across the battlefield. The supervisor watches in complete shock, noting that the 14-year-old is fighting with the coordination of a seasoned veteran. Lightning bolts crisscross the dark environment as Vincent utilizes the Dwarf King's trait to steady his stance and prepare his final move. A massive energy vortex erupts from the ground as the giant beast attempts to aggressively back away and create distance. The narrative warns of the demon's severe aggression, but Vincent calculates that its massive incoming strike will leave it completely exposed. A brilliant light beam pierces the center of the battlefield as Vincent moves to neutralize the recoil of his signature technique. Blinding energy streams radiate outward as the devastating absolute sword slash executes with maximum force. A glowing aura envelopes the battlefield as the team watches the dust settle from the massive elemental discharge. Vincent shifts his blade back to rest and calmly asks the Grand Chamberlain if he witnessed the execution. A dark realization suddenly dawns on the observers as a massive sphere of crimson energy begins to violently reconstruct itself. The terrible truth is shouted across the battlefield. The aggressive beast cannot be felled by a single blow because it possesses two separate lives. The resurrected monster surges back to life with amplified speed, sending debris and chaotic explosions tearing through the ruins. The cloaked beast swings its massive scythe once more as its exposed core begins to violently regenerate amidst the dark red smoke. Alarmed cries echo through the collapsing temple structure as the sheer force of the impact threatens to crush the team. Energy barriers are deployed to deflect the chaotic force as the combatants struggle against the overwhelming pressure. Vincent tracks the beast's movements with steady eyes, noting that its aggressive pattern perfectly matches the historical encounters from centuries ago. The beast's strength and speed multiply exponentially as it enters a total berserk state, filling the chamber with floating debris. A fierce burst of crimson light cuts diagonally across the frame as a mid-air defensive maneuver is executed. The situation turns critical as the solid stone walls completely cut off any viable path for retreat, trapping them inside. A sharp snarl echoes through the dark chamber as the primary fighters clash directly against the ancient stone pillars. Realizing their current plan is failing, the team prepares a desperate tactical adjustment. While the cloaked enemy growls in anticipation, the supervisor gestures urgently while delivering a solemn plea, invoking the revered name of Lady Sarvana, Vincent's birth mother. Flashbacks reveal a past wilderness invitation, where a bold young warrior extended an offer to join a legendary journey. The old companions stand under a clear sky, cementing their alliance to forge a new legend for the family name. Reflecting on past exhaustion from a life of conflict, the warrior remembers the precise moment they fell under her bold influence. A powerful foot plants firmly into the damp earth as a fierce roar signals an all-out assault against the target. A bright energy slash cuts horizontally across the deep forest clearing, demonstrating a masterclass in martial prowess. Triumphant cheers fill the cavernous environment as the shadowy beast is successfully driven back by a coordinated strike. The memories fade as the final announcement of total subjugation echoes through the glowing blue forest. The supervisor looks back with deep reverence, calling out to the memory of the legendary figure who once served as a pure ray of light. Shaking off the heavy cloak of sadness, the primary commander steps forward with a fiercely determined gaze. A sudden impact violently shatters the palace interior, cutting short a tense family confrontation. Harsh, mocking insults are hurled at a submissive Vincent as his sibling taunts his submissive posture. For 14 long years, internal monologues wrestled with the agonizing choice of whether to abandon the family estate entirely. A distressed cry rings out in the palace corridor as they realize the young master has finally earned direct recognition from the patriarch. The swirling dark energy currents snap the focus back to the high-stakes battle currently raging in the present day. A muscular warrior lunges forward with coiled power, driving a heavy blade directly through the fiery orange elemental chaos. Vincent signals the ultimate strike as his companions scramble to manage the volatile magical energy at their feet. A massive explosion of orange and yellow lightning fractures the stone cavern as the decisive blow connects with the target. The observer watches in absolute awe as the intense dust cloud begins to part across the ruined environment. Electrical arcs discharge violently against the fleshy surface of the monster, signaling a devastating impact. The warriors exchange a final look of total mutual reliance as hands are raised to channel the remaining mana flow. Vincent drops into a firm meditative stance to steady his core, while onlookers panic over the immense residual impact heading his way. A defensive fighter taunts the beast, declaring that he is the one successfully blocking its advance right now. Enveloped in intense elemental flames, the combatants trade furious swings inside the glowing circular arena. Revan smirks arrogantly at his opponent, mocking their perceived weakness mid-strike. A sudden realization hits as they discover the sword failed to receive the expected steel enhancement, leaving them vulnerable to a feral counterattack. Disarmed and desperate, the primary defender struggles to maintain a baseline defense without a weapon to protect Vincent. A warrior groans in sheer agony while grappling directly against a massive, sinewy shadow appendage. Vincent offers a calm word of praise to a battered Revan before a bright blue energy slash streaks across the low frame. The devastating absolute sword slash tears open a massive rift, exposing an unstable glowing core covered in cracks. A final, catastrophic explosion of pink and magenta energy completely vaporizes the remaining threat, prompting deep gratitude toward Revan. The Grand Chamberlain steps through the foliage, deeply questioning if this insane high-stakes gamble was the young master's plan from the very start. It is revealed that the magical barrier was specifically calibrated so that only one single monster could breach the perimeter at a time. Standing amidst the debris, Vincent raises his right hand to activate his next phase, declaring it is now his turn to prove himself. Vincent reveals that even with full body strengthening, his physical form can only endure the absolute sword slash twice before failing. Sweat pours down his face as he commands his body to endure the massive pressure of a vertical purple energy strike. The narrative confirms that the beast's absolute core is laid completely bare only during its rapid regeneration phase. A fierce blue beam shatters the dark space as the final arc of the absolute sword slash cuts cleanly through the target's defenses. The supervisor smiles in quiet relief, realizing all her intense worries about the young lord's capability were entirely misplaced. Though his physical body is left battered and exhausted from the exertion, Vincent stands tall and vows that he will never fall. A massive shockwave suddenly ripples through the forest canopy, catching the armored team completely off guard. The companion points in horror toward the shifting ground, realizing a massive, active summoning circle has been triggered beneath their feet. A titanic pale hand emerges from the pitch-black void, forcing the pink-haired onlooker to recognize the arrival of a relic guardian. The warriors immediately drop into aggressive combat stances to face the automated ancient threat. The monstrous hand fractures the surrounding bedrock as blinding white energy spills from the entity's core. Clad in tactical gear, the party coordinates a rapid strike against the massive stone-like creature dominating the landscape. Declaring his title as a chamberlain of the family line, Raelsa Belladon ignites his blade to directly engage the hidden beast. Raelsa shouts that the ancient mechanism is now functioning due to its extreme age, urging the young lords to move out of harm's way. Activating the 7th chapter of Balladian swordsmanship, Raelsa cuts through the blue magical haze to establish a defensive perimeter. A massive serpentine construct of pure frost energy is unleashed, commanding the northern winds to freeze the attacker solid. Observers gape in absolute awe, realizing they are witnessing the overwhelming power of a true 7-star master in real time. A powerful purple beam fractures the final pedestal, completely neutralizing the ancient mechanism once and for all. The companions rush over to demand an explanation for a sudden sword strike aimed at seemingly thin air. Raelsa peers through his lenses in utter disbelief as the Guardian's true, hidden form is finally exposed to the light. A brilliant circle of white magic erupts as the special trait of the Galactic Wanderer is fully activated. Vincent delivers a crushing palm strike to steady the area, prompting immediate inquiries about the team's physical condition. Realsa realizes he completely missed the entity's presence due to the ancient structure, but the young lord discovered it instantly. The party approaches a small circular structure built deep into the ground, completely surrounded by jagged ice formations. Realsa kneels to examine the contents, ecstatically announcing the discovery of a dead dragon skeleton, one of the rarest ingredients in existence. The supervisor declares that since Vincent unearthed the ancient relic, this incredible trophy belongs exclusively to him. Vincent offers a sincere word of gratitude to his guide under the glowing canopy of the outdoor clearing. Realsa bypasses the Council of Elders to report directly to the stern Patriarch at the eerie Graveyard of Swords. The Patriarch listens with a serious expression as Realsa details how Vincent conquered the strict timeline through tactical genius. The report confirms that the young lord went on to defeat a second beast entirely alone, unearthing the long-lost artifact of the first Patriarch. The Patriarch fixes a stern gaze upon the supervisor and delivers an absolute, shocking command: break the dragon's bone. An invisible shockwave shatters the testing block as the supervisor begs the ancestors for forgiveness before executing the order. A brilliant burst of blue energy rips through the clearing, leaving the dragon bone unharmed. A warrior cries out in total shock and disbelief, realizing he gave his absolute all yet failed to destroy the item. The Patriarch gazes at the vertical sword hilt, quietly acknowledging that his young son possesses a truly anomalous special power. Vincent wakes up completely out of it from a brutal subjugation battle, desperately needing some rest while everyone around him panics. Sari asks if she really has to tag along to the Crimson Fortress, while Wilson loses his mind because he is absolutely terrified of monsters. Vincent calls out Julian before pointing out the insane, overflowing magic energy leaking out of Sari's body. Vincent asks Sari for her last name, explaining that her family has a super rare trait called the magic body. When the guys look into her family history, Sari softly drops the bad news that her grandmother has already passed away. Vincent wonders how a family with hacks like that got ruined, figuring out someone tried to hide the existence of a heavenly exoskeleton. The group learns that Vincent's late mom, Lady Servana, was also a Hisley, which is why the Patriarch always looked incredibly depressed whenever someone brought her up. Turns out his mom was amazing and hired outcasts without discrimination, personally saving their Grand Chamberlain, Realsa, when she was at rock bottom. Vincent is busy appreciating his awesome mom when Revan suddenly bursts through the door to find them. Young Master Revan gets ready to pack his bags and leave, prompting Vincent to ask if he's really hitting the road already. Vincent locks in a firm handshake and asks Revan for a massive favor: to investigate the secret 500-year history of the Hisley family. Once Revan leaves, Vincent walks up to Realsa to talk about his mother's legacy. Vincent asks Realsa for a favor, not as a son, but as an independent warrior, begging her to train him like a drill sergeant. Realsa struggles with her own hesitation, feeling a deep sense of loyalty to Lady Servana. She locks eyes with him and warns him that she won't go easy on him, a challenge our boy accepts with total confidence. Realsa explains that people can learn traits without visualization if they have the right circuit, but she refuses to hand over the answers on a silver platter. She asks if he's going to use his signature blade, challenging him to try and cut her during the 5 months before his enrollment. Vincent instantly realizes the massive power gap the second Realsa activates her trait. Realsa unleashes a terrifying explosion of energy, promising to shut down his destructive swordsmanship before he can even set it up. Vincent is left completely shook when she aims a lethal strike straight at his eye, proving she's actually trying to send him to the respawn screen. The fight went for about as long as I could last in bed with my ex, but a week later, Realsa is moving at teleportation speeds and roasting him for attacking too slowly. A massive blast of energy ends the spar, with Realsa letting him know that throwing more than 2 attacks will completely break him. Vincent notices his training sword is on the verge of snapping again, so he decides it's time to visit a blacksmith. Realsa takes Vincent to a dark workshop, immediately roasting the blacksmith for losing his touch since they last met. The rugged smith Hansen asks who is bothering him in the middle of the night, right before Realsa dumps a whole sack of ruined swords on the floor. Hansen checks out the pulverized metal, noting the insane intensity of the fights these blades went through. When Hansen asks if he was fighting some sort of mutant monster, he finds out the client is actually Vincent, the rumored good-for-nothing 7th son. Raelsa apologizes for the late-night visit, but explains that the kid insisted on seeing the Crimson Lotus blade. Vincent stands there completely shocked to realize this rugged dude is actually the legendary master blacksmith, Hansen. Julian explains that, decades ago, Hansen stopped forging legendary epic-tier swords to mass-produce cheap weapons so commoners could actually defend themselves. Vincent introduces himself politely as the 7th young master, earning a massive side-eye from the rugged blacksmith. Hansen laughs straight at his noble title, but Vincent calmly tells him he's not here to disrespect his grind. Vincent validates Hansen's career choices, telling him that his path of helping the common people was 100% correct. Hansen admits the kid's sharp brain runs in the family and demands to inspect the current condition of the Crimson Lotus heirloom. Hansen checks the glowing blade in complete disbelief, wondering how it doesn't have a single scratch after fighting a crimson demon and sparring with Raelsa. Demanding to see what kind of swordsmanship Vincent is running, Hansen aggressively tells him to stop stalling and show him. Julian panics because Vincent already used his ultimate, absolute sword slash twice today, while Raelsa tells Hansen to stop yelling because people are trying to sleep. Vincent realizes Raelsa and Hansen basically act like a dysfunctional father and daughter, despite all the loud arguing. Vincent promises to bring Sari to the forge tomorrow, which instantly gets the old blacksmith on board. Bro starts cranking 90s with his sword the next day, as Vincent unleashes a rapid, flashing combo of absolute swordsmanship that completely reignites Hansen's passion. Hansen watches this explosive technique with his jaw on the floor, admitting that the kid actually has some serious moves. Hansen confesses the kid has impressed him enough to forge him a custom weapon, leaving Vincent stunned. Hansen reveals he has wanted to build a legendary sword for a long time, but it requires a ridiculously rare ingredient, a dragon skeleton. Vincent and Julian exchange a look before asking if a massive dragon skeleton would be enough to get the job done. Vincent immediately shushes the screaming blacksmith, explaining that only his dad and Raelsa know about this hidden cheat item. Vincent asks to craft the dragon skeleton directly onto his heirloom, Crimson Lotus sword, instead of building a new one, and Hansen tells them to come back in 3 weeks. 3 weeks later, the squad rolls up only to find Hansen's workshop completely engulfed in a roaring, unstable fire. While the place burns, Vincent tells a panicked Sari to snap out of it, realizing something went horribly wrong inside the smithy. They sprint past the burning rubble to rescue Master Hansen from the collapsing building. Julian screams that the raw magic energy from the dragon skeleton is violently flooding the entire room. Vincent tries to haul the unconscious blacksmith out, but roaring flames completely block the exit, trapping them in an absolute oven. Julian begs for any kind of defensive skill before they get turned into barbecue. Vincent confirms he actually has a specialized blade technique built entirely for defense. Channeling his past life instincts as the literal reincarnation of Davin Samyon, Vincent taps into his muscle memory to handle the elemental disaster. Vincent uses the Samyon swordsmanship, gentle steel breaker, letting a silent blade cut straight through the roaring fire to save their lives. Julian watches in complete shock as the fire gets deleted from existence, leaving them bruised, tattered, and miraculously alive. Vincent smirks at a groaning Hansen, joking that since he can still talk trash, the old man is going to be perfectly fine. Hansen wakes up and shows off the completed weapon, admitting he had never hammered a raw dragon skeleton before. Vincent takes a practice swing, unleashing a massive, blinding column of golden light that leaves him completely awestruck. The upgraded Crimson Lotus now completely absorbs its user's magic properties and has basically gained infinite durability. Vincent jokingly asks Hansen to make another sword, since this one is so clean, but Hansen snaps that he is completely out of dragon bones. Right on cue, Sari steps forward and reveals another hidden dragon skeleton, completely breaking the master blacksmith's brain. Trying to get Hansen to agree to another forge is about as persuasive as trying to convince your parents you need Robux. But Vincent notes that only the patriarch knows about this item, leaving Hansen laughing at the kid's ridiculous knack for getting what he wants. Thinking back on his crazy progress, Vincent meets up with Raelsa to review his combat skills. Raelsa tells him she was already paid for the skeleton 14 years ago, praising his insane growth as a warrior. Vincent confidently declares that he's going to beat her today and counter her 7-star martial arts field. The two clash in a brutal duel, with Vincent gritting his teeth through the crushing speed of Rails' attacks. Ray also reminds him of his big talk, but Vincent locks in and perfectly blocks her incoming strike. Julian watches from the sidelines, noticing that the sheer power and force of Vincent's strikes have completely evolved. Vincent utilizes the buffed-up properties of the Crimson Lotus to keep up with her aggressive pacing. Ray also notices the weapon's upgrade and decides to take off the kid gloves, suddenly vanishing from sight at hypersonic speeds. Refusing to be tricked by her speed, Vincent keeps his eyes locked onto her movement trails through the air. Predicting her exact move, Vincent smirks and cuts straight through her path when she tries to ambush his back. Raelsa is utterly shocked that he read her movements within a single month, forcing him to drop an absolute sword slash. Raelsa loses her weapon in the clash, but Vincent stops his blade, stating he doesn't want to win off a cheap shot. Raelsa tells him to pick his sword back up, instructing him to always remember how to handle opponents who outstat him. Acknowledging her advice, Vincent focuses his mind to counter her final lesson. Vincent charges forward, successfully slicing right through her magic field to score a solid hit on the high-tier instructor. Raelsa realizes he perfectly bypassed her main trait, formally wrapping up their brutal rematch. After 2 days of intense visualization, Vincent successfully masters a powerful new magic under the Galactic Wanderer's blessing. Bro is locked in like he's grinding to get level 99 mining, and Julian watches in awe as Vincent activates the single-step Frostwalk trait, turning the ground into a literal ice rink. 4 months later, while checking their files, Julian suddenly has an absolute panic attack over a financial disaster. Turns out Varnelli, the co-owner of the 6th Magic Tower where they invested all their travel funds, died in a sudden research explosion that got ruled a suicide. Losing these funds leaves our characters completely broke, giving them the perfect reason to go infiltrate the Crimson Fortress. Julian cries over their empty wallets, prompting Vincent to dig deeper into the tower's management structure. To get their vanished wealth back, they decide to track down Varnelli's younger sibling who runs the tower's assets. They identify the target as Vargon Pagoda, who is currently running high-level business over at the Crimson Fortress. Vincent and Julian immediately pack their bags and head toward the mountains to go hunt down their missing cash. Vincent arrives at the snow-capped cliffs of the Crimson Fortress, where the checkpoint guards hit him with the classic, "You have to walk from here." Hearing that he arrived, Headmaster Vargon Pagoda orders a hidden, hyper-difficult entrance exam to completely weed out the noble family's rumored trash son. Vargon declares the exam open, triggering a dangerous magic trap in the middle of the mountain pass. Julian points out the massive fortress gate, completely unaware that a deadly ambush is about to drop on them. Suddenly, a pack of 18 predatory blue-eyed white tigers bursts out of the snow to attack the squad. Vincent steps in to draw their aggro, instantly deducing that real tigers do not hunt in massive packs. Julian panics at the massive frames of the lunging monsters, but Vincent realizes the creatures are completely fake. Realizing they are just illusions being run by a human controller, Vincent decides to ignore the tigers entirely and go hunt down the caster. Knowing the human controller has to be hiding nearby to protect the core, Vincent scans the area and locks onto his location. Utilizing his newly unlocked Frostwalk, Vincent slides right past the fake monsters to strike the hidden magic core element. The examiner loses it because this dude just shattered the entire illusion with a single, absolute sword slash, forcing Vargon to formally accept him as a rank 9 cadet. The surrounding mages watch with their jaws open as the supposed good-for-nothing son effortlessly speedruns the impossible trial. Vargon steps out to officially let him in, while Julian reminds Vincent that their actual main mission is to secure every single dollar of their stolen cash. The second he steps into Residence Hall 5, Vincent is immediately confronted by Malone, the arrogant 6th son of the Adenka family. Malone, a massive bully who used to target Vincent back when his combat stats were trash, steps up to humiliate him in front of everyone. Malone tries to physically assault Vincent's subordinates, just to flex his absolute dominance over the house. Recognizing his trash brother's incredibly predictable anime villain behavior, Vincent casually steps in to block the hit. But Vincent is already moving at speeds the tyrant can't even process. Vincent completely deletes his brother in a matter of seconds, leaving him battered, bruised, and coughing blood all over the floor. This brutal beatdown leaves the surrounding mages completely stunned. instantly cementing Vincent's terrifying new reputation as the baddest freshman in the fortress. All hell breaks loose in the academy dorms as Malone Adenka starts screaming in a total rage, leaving Vincent to wonder why this idiot is trying to fight in the middle of residential housing right before a massive blast shatters the entire room. Watching the total mess unfold, Julian tells his brother Vincent that they should probably use this chaos as a perfect chance to make a strategic move. Meanwhile, far away from the school, while two guards casually talk about grabbing a drink on the job, one of the fighters grumbles about how much his boss is stressing him out, all while staring down at some bloody, raw meat sitting on a wooden counter. Back at the academy, Instructor Bronda reports to Headmaster Vargan Pagoda, explaining that the new kid, Vincent Adenka, somehow managed to completely destroy a complex magical anomaly that even a veteran 7-star martial artist has never heard of. Vincent calmly tells the dean to just go back to the fortress, leaving the rest of the staff standing there in total disbelief at how bold this freshman is being. Instructor Braun steps into the grand hall to formally apologize to the dean for the broken building. Instructor Braun explains that, since the brawl was just a quick spar between two direct descendants of the prestigious Adenka family, he decided to step in as a mediator, just like Vincent asked. Dean Vargan uses his administrative powers to make sure neither of them gets punished, officially allowing the spar to happen and telling both cadets to fight with honor. Stepping onto the arena, Malone points at Vincent's blade and laughs, claiming it's just a cheap replica of their dad's sword. But Vincent just chuckles at the absolute nonsense. They start throwing hands, and Malone activates his unique aura trait called Coercion, unleashing a wave of red and purple magic meant to paralyze his opponent with pure fear. The heavy, oppressive pressure of the Coercion aura floods the courtyard, making nearby cadets gasp for air. Malone is stunned to see Vincent standing there completely fine, prompting Vincent to calmly explain that his innate spirit makes him totally immune to this stuff. The students in the stands start panicking and whispering in shock when they realize the terrifying aura didn't even make the new kid blink. Feeling totally humiliated, Malone screams that Vincent must be using a cheap trick and fires off raw elemental mana to crush him with his sword, causing a massive explosion to rock the ground. Malone sports a smug grin before a sudden blast of orange energy leaves him looking around in total shock as his opponent completely vanishes into thin air. Malone rages in confusion until Vincent drops out of the sky like a flash of light, cutting straight through the air with a massive mid-air strike. Malone groans under the heavy physical strain, while Vincent pulls out a rapid blade technique called Frostwalk, wrapping himself in bright, icy blue energy. Vincent buffs his blade with a massive body-strengthening move, unleashing a blinding white shockwave that tears right through Malone's defenses. The violent impact shatters the arena floor as the crowd watches this new cadet completely wreck the entire academy hierarchy in a single move. The onlookers point out that while everyone knows Malone is normally trash who only holds his rank because of his family name, Vincent is legitimately threatening to end this man's career. Selbira and the other students rush over to the courtyard in total shock, looking down at Malone's broken body while praising Vincent's insane skills. Watching the whole thing from the shadows, Selbira silently wonders if he could ever be as cool as Vincent, though he notes Malone's special blessing trait means this fight isn't over yet. Julian eagerly cheers his brother on to completely finish the guy, while Vincent realizes that even though Malone dropped his sword, the dean hasn't actually called the match yet. Suddenly, a massive burst of electrical energy explodes as Malone taps into an ancient power, activating his ultimate, Blessing of the Lightning Giant. The surrounding students gasp in absolute terror as a blinding storm of golden lightning completely blankets the entire battlefield. Vincent grits his teeth against the electric shock, stepping forward to swing his blade directly into the middle of the lightning storm. Malone starts bragging about having the divine power to control electricity as he pours the full, blinding weight of the lightning giant's blessing into his attack. Vincent gasps as he gets completely swallowed up by the massive, crackling electrical currents. Malone aggressively swings his elemental sword, mocking his opponent and asking how he likes the overwhelming power of a real birth trait. Vincent stands firm against the swirling magic, which only makes Malone brag even harder about the specialized power he was born with. Malone dismissively explains that he only hid this power for so many years because using it was an absolute chore, leaving Vincent completely stunned. Malone declares that nobody his age could ever hope to beat him after all the painful, grueling training he put himself through. Vincent angrily cuts him off, telling Malone to shut up with that nonsense, because he is completely ignoring everyone else's real hard work while stepping all over them. Vincent points out that Malone is talking an awful lot for a guy whose right arm is currently completely fried and mangled from overcharging his own lightning mana. Vincent reminds Malone of his bet to risk his own wrist that the family weapon was a fake, lunging forward to deliver one final, calculated strike. Malone roars in pure rage, swinging blindly as Vincent's sword slash cuts cleanly through the fiery battlefield. The massive energy clash shatters the pavement as onlookers realize Malone has completely overindulged on his own destructive mana. The magic barrier groans under the stress of the impact, making nearby students scream in fear as the stone floor cracks completely open. The violent explosions finally die down as the cadets scramble to check if everyone managed to survive the massive structural collapse. Realizing the extreme danger, the instructors frantically order a complete evacuation to get all the cadets to safety. Malone laughs maniacally as his body keeps overflowing with volatile mana, even though his technique has more wide-open holes than a piece of Swiss cheese. Vincent forcefully plants his feet onto the stone floor and shouts as he moves in to stop the rogue cadet. Vincent realizes that keeping up this high-level combat is putting an immense burden on his body, but he channels his glowing runes to fix his previous mistakes. A massive impact rocks the circular chamber, forcing Vincent to move quickly as he realizes his fighting space has gotten incredibly small. Vincent notes that it's currently too hard to pull off his standard absolute sword slash, but Julian tells him to stop complaining and just adapt the strike to slash something else entirely. Vincent says he completely trusts Julian's plan, leaping straight into a swirling storm of elemental energy. Vincent grits his teeth as his Frostwalk skill completely runs out from that massive leap, while Malone roars that this arena floor is about to become his grave. A massive explosion rocks the ground as Vincent realizes his opponent completely bit the bait. Vincent delivers a blinding slash that completely shatters the surrounding defensive barrier in a massive burst of fiery energy. Malone stumbles backward through the stone ruins, gasping in complete shock as his ultimate technique falls completely apart. Vincent stands proudly in the glowing light beams, declaring that a martial artist's vow is heavier than anything else as he uses his father's sword to defend his brother's honor. Vincent smirks coldly at his trembling opponent, noting that a little brother can never let his older sibling look like a liar. Standing over the defeated rogue cadet, Vincent repeats how much a martial artist's vow truly matters while standing under a brilliant, divine light. Malone lies completely broken on the shattered floor, forced to realize that Vincent's single sword bypassed a mana barrier that was supposedly light years ahead of normal fighters. The dean steps down onto the ruined courtyard to finally put an end to the fight, declaring Vincent Adenka the absolute winner of the duel. As the crowd cheers for the young master, Julian arrives with a low-level healer to talk about medical terms for the bleeding loser. The 5th-class priest stands in absolute awe of the victory, while Vincent casually notes that his token grants him the exact same premium treatment as the family's original owner. The humble healer quickly gives in to the demand, while a broken Malone coughs up blood on the pavement, cursing Vincent as a sly bastard. Vincent stands directly over the broken cadet, issuing a chilling ultimatum by asking if it's really a good idea to have his arm fixed right now. Julian celebrates the sweet taste of revenge as Vincent uses Malone's absolute desperation to force a complete psychological surrender. Vincent tells Malone to make his choice, forcing the humiliated representative to weakly beg for them to fix his hand. When Vincent pretends he can't hear him, a frantic Malone screams at the top of his lungs for them to stop playing games and patch up the nerve damage. The doctor patches up the wound but gives Malone a strict warning, telling him to absolutely avoid any heavy lifting since this cheap treatment is far from magical. Malone retreats in absolute humiliation, desperately swearing that he is still the true king of the school and will take back his stolen power. Malone tries to blast lightning into a nearby rock to vent his anger, completely unaware that his unstable arm can't handle heavy combat anymore. A week after the public match, Vincent sets up a highly private, secure meeting inside the headmaster's personal office. Vincent walks past the grand nameplate of Dean Vargan Pagoda, entering the study where the powerful former mercenary quietly welcomes him in. Vargan notes the awkward social gap between them, pointing out that Vincent will eventually go back to being a direct descendant's seventh son, while he is just a dean who used to be a lowly mercenary. Vincent cuts straight through the small talk, aggressively demanding to know why the dean investigated him, intentionally approached his sister, and what his actual goal is. Vincent exposes Vargon's true hidden motive, revealing that the headmaster was secretly investing heavy cash into his late sister, Varnelli Pagoda. The accusation forces the authoritative dean to completely reevaluate his past choices as the two sit down for a tense chat. Vargon loses his cold composure and confesses his past, admitting he ran away from his family and the Magic Tower to live as a frontline mercenary after they abandoned him. Vincent directly asks why Vargon refuses to drop the historic pagoda name if he truly hates his family, pointing out his lingering emotional attachments to his late sister's memory. Meanwhile, back across the academy barracks, the rest of the student body sits around gossiping about the massive political shift caused by the duel. Deep inside a secluded room, Malone's intense insecurity drives him completely insane as he furiously swears to murder Vincent. A dark, grotesque monster appears from the shadows, offering Malone a sketchy contract to grant his deepest desires in exchange for his literal soul. Back in the office, the narrator notes that the Pagodas are a famous family that has run the Magic Tower for generations, while Vincent continues interrogating the dean. Vargon remembers the intense abuse and misery he went through at the Magic Tower, shouting that he would gladly destroy the bloodline that completely ruined his life. Vincent calmly responds that he already knows the truth behind the dean's deep isolation and hidden trauma. Vincent explains that, despite running away, what Vargon really wanted in the end was simple acceptance and love from the family that threw him out. Vincent states that the only reason the dean holds on to the historic name is because of his lingering attachments to his bright, talented sister, Varnelli. Vargon bitterly admits that his sister's radiant brightness only caused him more misery, since he was constantly abused and compared to her wherever he went. Finding a rare alignment of goals, the dean admits he never expected to get such profound therapy advice from a mere cadet. Recognizing Vincent's worth, Vargon officially promises his full financial and administrative backing, offering to sponsor all of his living expenses at the fortress. Julian is left completely stunned by the size of their growing network, mockingly praising Vincent's incredible ability to collect powerful masters like Pokemon. The meeting is interrupted by Selbira, the Rank 9 secondary cadet representative, who approaches Vincent's squad in the hallway. Selbira immediately activates his signature appraisal trait, Discernment, allowing him to visually check an opponent's hidden power and potential. Selbira gasps in shock as his appraisal trait uncovers a bizarre, total absence of standard mana in the area. Selbira frantically warns that this weird void mimics the ancient forbidden archetype of the evil spirit of Davin, prompting Vincent to demand every single detail about the entity. Selbira explains that, after Archdemon Davin was defeated by the Hero King, his residual spirit started offering contracts to desperate losers, granting massive power using their lifespans as collateral. Selbira explains that, after Archdemon Davin was defeated by the Hero King, his residual spirit started offering contracts to desperate losers, granting massive power using their lifespans as collateral. Vincent confirms the physical existence of the demon, while guards down in the courtyard start noticing that a core bedroom is completely empty. Flashbacks reveal the demonic entity whispering to Malone in the dark, commanding him to sign the unholy contract to get his revenge. Malone eagerly sacrifices his humanity, getting completely consumed by dark red energy, while the Night Watch shift begins checking the quiet barracks. The cadets note that everyone else is completely asleep, quickly realizing that Malone is entirely missing from his bed. Instructor Brond conducts an exterior sweep during a heavy snowstorm, tracking a sinister presence through the empty courtyard. Suddenly, a violent burst of corruption shatters the courtyard as the Night Watch demands to know who is hiding in the freezing dark. A grotesque figure roars from the shadows, completely warped by a black and red demonic aura. Night Watch member gasps in absolute horror as he recognizes the distorted face of the rogue cadet. Malone stands as a physical vessel for the Archdemon Davin, his skin and eyes entirely corrupted by the glowing, unholy energy. The Watchman draws their blade, declaring that he is no longer scared of the Adenka family's corrupted trash as a massive explosion rocks the roof. Malone laughs maniacally, screaming that anyone who dares to aim a sword at the true king will be swiftly executed. Instructor Brond channels his maximum 7-star martial energy, desperately attempting to build a defense against the incoming demonic onslaught. Malone effortlessly shatters the elite defenses, leaving Instructor Brond bloodied and screaming for someone to sound the campus alarm as he goes down. Deep inside the quiet dormitory, Vincent sits up alone, tracking the physical indicators of a major structural security breach. The emergency sirens suddenly blare through the halls, instantly waking up the rest of the sleeping cadets. Vincent leads the charge down the stairs, moving swiftly into the main hall to coordinate with Sulbira and the security units. Catching the heavy scent of fresh blood, Vincent takes immediate tactical control and orders Sulbira to notify the dean via communication crystal that they have a massive emergency. A massive crash echoes from the courtyard, prompting Vincent to command the surrounding students to follow him straight out into the storm. The cadets hurry through the debris, tracking the massive magical signatures radiating across the snowy campus grounds. Sulbira suggests deploying the restricted spatial barrier network known as the Triangular Defensive Seal, noting that the center requires a high-ranking master to survive the feedback. The plan immediately stalls out when they discover Instructor Brond has already been completely defeated and left bleeding out on the cold stone floor. Malone looms over the fallen instructor, his glowing red vortex completely trapping the elite fighter in a cloud of dark ash. Vincent steps onto the bloodied courtyard, his sword drawn as he directly confronts the towering demonic shadow. Malone grins widely at the arrival of his rivals, boasting that the entire collection of trash has finally gathered for his personal entertainment. Vincent tracks the pool of blood spreading across the ground, recognizing the exact corrupt characteristic of the evil spirit of Davin. Malone channels his black mana, roaring that he will finally show everyone who the real king of the academy is as a massive shockwave tears through the courtyard. The cadets scream in terror as the unholy shockwave hits, forcing Vincent to shout for his peers to hold their ground and not be shaken by the demon. Looking at the defeated 7-star instructor, Sulbira panics, realizing that fighting Malone right now is mathematically impossible for standard cadets. Vincent overrides the fear, directly asking Sulbira if he can perfectly cast the geometry for the defensive seal right this second. Vincent makes the incredibly dangerous decision to ignore the school hierarchy, firmly declaring that he will personally take the lethal core position to center the seal. Sulbira completely objects to the suicidal play, reminding Vincent of the strict requirements of this high-level magic. Sulbira screams that it's totally impossible because Vincent isn't even a 5-star master, prompting Vincent to tell him to shut up and execute the formation anyway. The cadets reluctantly move into position, locking the barrier formation together to bind the rampaging demonic entity. Julian frantically warns his brother that the magical feedback is too high and begs him to use Frostwalk to run away from the field. Vincent refuses to budge, groaning in pure agony as the immense pressure tries to crush him like a can of Coke. Malone mocks his struggles, slamming the stationary glowing blue shield with a massive blast of concentrated corruption. Vincent pours his hidden spirit traits into his blade, successfully reinforcing the barrier to deflect the unholy lightning strikes. An enraged Malone exploits the shield's limits, leaping forward to deliver a massive, crushing wave of red energy. The terrifying force cracks the stone paving, forcing the defending cadets to gasp at the sheer magnitude of the demonic aura. Vincent struggles under the weight of the spell, his muscles tensing as the unholy crackle continues to break his defense. Malone points a predatory grin at the trembling students, soaking in their absolute terror as they look up at the shadow of the archdemon. Vincent roars for his allies to cast away their fear, reminding them that a true martial artist only respects honor, not a monster who gave it up. Sulbira notices Vincent is deliberately tanking the entire crushing weight of the seal, while boosting everyone's morale through pure willpower. The cadets coordinate their energy on a synchronized count of 3, unleashing a collective magical pulse to lock Malone in place. Vincent commands the rogue cadet to give up, stating that the Academy's elite martial artists are already on their way to the courtyard. The archdemon's voice echoes inside Malone's mind, driving him to scream that he will gladly give up his entire human life force if it means seeing Vincent die in terror. Malone's black mana becomes significantly tougher as he completely surrenders his remaining life expectancy for absolute destructive power. A massive shockwave of unholy energy erupts from Malone's blade, threatening to tear all the cadets apart. The defending cadets are thrown backward across the snowy courtyard by the explosive impact of the demonic blast. Vincent realizes the situation is getting bad and he needs to do something. Malone charges directly overhead, Vincent ready to slash him in two. As Malone strikes down, there is suddenly a seal protecting Vincent. Vincent realizes it was Cizan, who at the last second got the seal back up to protect him. Malone, even more enraged that his last attack fails, roars in anger. The cadets desperately scream to hold their ground just a little longer, as Malone's remaining energy threatens to violently explode across the campus. Impossible. Vincent thinks he's starting to see a strange black sword path directly at Malone's right arm. Is he really seeing this? Vincent can't make up his mind if he should slash or wait for reinforcements. The seal begins to crack, and Vincent realizes he has absolutely no choices left as he prepares his final attack. Vincent channels Absolute Sword / Alternate Form. Chapter 2. As Malone asks him to take the fight seriously, Vincent launches his Galactic Wanderer attack at Malone, but he can't seem to strike him by following the sword path. Malone taunts Vincent. "You think I was just going to sit and do nothing? I'm going to grill you, crispy Vincent." The other cadets yell for Vincent, thinking he's hurt. Vincent's left hand was struck and can't grasp the sword properly anymore, but he can't give up now. He goes in for one more attack. Malone quickly grabs Vincent's left arm, telling him, "Thanks. You really think I'm going to be struck down by someone with an injured left arm?" Malone scorches Vincent's left arm. Vincent grits his teeth in pain and notices there's an opportunity. With a quick fluid motion, Vincent catches his sword with his right arm and in the blink of an eye, fires an absolute sword slash, aiming directly for Malone's wrist. Absolute sword slash helping hand. Malone's right arm is cut cleanly off. Vincent falls to his knees, gasping for breath. Doesn't know if he defeated Malone or not. Vincent realizes the unknown black sword path is used, has severed the aura of the evil spirit from Malone. Malone, now angry, fires one last attack at Vincent. Vincent braces himself for more fighting, but exhausted, he can't move. Vincent, panicking, can't move. He has to figure out what happened 500 years ago. The Dean arrives at the last second and orders Malone to stop horsing around. The containment bars slide permanently into place around the broken body of Malone Adenka, completely paralyzing his movements. Malone glares up at the headmaster in utter disbelief, gasping in shock at the absolute finality of Dean Vargon's sealing magic. Vargon coldly explains that while this high-level matrix takes a long time to properly set up, absolutely no martial artist with mana can ever hope to escape its geometric lock. The backup units quickly bind the rogue elements, moving the secure containment capsules out of the ruined academy courtyard. One of the arriving elite fighters steps forward, praising the extraordinary mental fortitude displayed by the young cadet during the crisis. The instructors inform Vincent that they will take complete administrative control from here, allowing the battered hero to finally rest his eyes. Selbira calls out to his comrade in absolute relief, completely awed by the sheer strategic gamble that saved the entire student body from destruction. As the chaos finally dies down, Vincent looks around the grand stone pillars of the courtyard, his inner spirit safely intact as he prepares for the next high-stakes play. Herka bows politely to Patriarch Khan Adenka, who basically tells him to lose the attitude and just talk normally. The Patriarch demands to know exactly what went down, making Herka let out a massive sigh. The final report shows 15 injured rank, 9 cadets, and 1 dead instructor named Bronde, though somehow, Cadet Saizen managed to not die while fighting Malone. After feeling bad about Instructor Bronde, the council reminds everyone that making deals with evil spirits is always a terrible idea. They wonder how Malone even survived, considering guys possessed by evil spirits usually get a massive cheat code of power. According to the other cadets, Malone stopped being possessed after Vincent sliced him up and his chopped-off arm refused to stick back on. The council thinks back to the weird sword moves Vincent used during the assembly before moving on to Malone's punishment. Since he broke the rules of being a martial artist by signing a contract with an evil spirit, Malone is grounded in a guest house for life and loses his sword privileges. The council shifts gears to figuring out a reward for Vincent, who is currently knocked out cold in the medical bay. Inside a weird dream world, Vincent calls out for Julian and looks around, wondering where on earth they just landed. Vincent realizes they are stuck inside Malone's memories, which is a total glitch, because this definitely didn't happen in his past life. They watch a flashback where Malone is throwing a tantrum, yelling that he's already the strongest cadet around and doesn't need help. A scary boss figure yells at Malone to remember he's a son of a Denka, telling him to bring out the lightning giant unless he wants to die on stage. Malone listens and starts charging up a massive wave of blue electric magic energy. Vincent recognizes the unstable magic of the lightning giant in the memory, but suddenly senses something creepy and yells for Julian. Suddenly left entirely alone, Vincent is forced into an aggressive, unprovoked confrontation by his past life's mother. Vincent gasps in shock as he realizes these random flashbacks are actually his own repressed memories from his previous life. Familiar names like Falcon and Arslan echo through the burning, chaotic mental landscape as a random hand reaches out. Suddenly, he gets hit with violent flashbacks of his old fight with Kajin right in the middle of the swirling memory storm. He remembers being locked up in the Samyeon jail, yelling that power can't hide the truth right before magical chains wrap around him. His past identities start overlapping, and an old promise to fight for a brother's honor shifts back to the name Arslan. Tied up by glowing blue chains, a completely confused Vincent demands to know who else is hiding in his brain. A mysterious voice tells him that Arslan is actually Julian, leaving Vincent screaming in absolute denial through the static energy. We see an epic battle that has been dragging on for 500 years because these guys just refuse to let go of old betrayals. Vincent lets out a powerful shout as the broken memory world starts falling apart around him. Vincent snaps awake back in his real body, huffing and puffing as the memory of Arslan fades away. Julian asks if he's doing okay after vanishing like that, while Vincent quietly tries to process the bizarre ghost trip. He wonders if his past self came to visit him before dying, but his thoughts are interrupted when a nearby wash basin crashes to the floor. A crying Sari bawls her eyes out in relief, happy to see that her young master is finally awake. Vincent gives her a small smile and thanks her for actually caring about whether he lived or died. The touching moment is instantly ruined when a playful voice asks if she's third-wheeling, revealing the headmaster has arrived. Vincent tries to act formal, but the red-haired headmaster teases him, saying titles are too stiff and tells him to just call her big sister. Vincent asks why she isn't at the fortress, and she casually explains that Dean Vargon does all the actual work anyway, adding that she has to finish some business in 3 days. She drops the act and asks Vincent for a favor, telling him she wants him to enter an upcoming fight. She explains the fight is part of the Friendly Exchange Meeting, which is just a fancy name for the massive rivalry match between the Samyeon and Adenka families. She adds that both family heads will be watching the event, which is being held at the Crimson Fortress this year. Vincent asks why she's just now telling him this, and she admits that Malone was originally supposed to take the spot before he went evil. She warns Vincent that his opponent is the terrifyingly strong 6th son of the Samyeon family, a guy nobody expected Malone to beat anyway. She mentions that nobody besides Dea has ever won this thing, but Vincent boldly claims that entering a fight expecting to lose goes against everything his family stands for. Amused by his confidence, she asks if he's seriously going to try and win, and if he can actually back up that big talk. Patriarch Khan Adenka walks into the room, prompting Vincent to say that his performance at the True Swords Assembly already proved he's built different. Vincent looks his dad right in the eyes and promises to bring home the win, earning some praise from the patriarch before being told to go back to sleep. As the family leaders leave, the elders start discussing what kind of reward they should give Vincent for his recent achievements. The elders decide to carve Vincent's name onto the Crimson Monument, a giant stone wall reserved exclusively for Adenka heroes. They talk about how historically important the monument is before splitting up, promising to meet up again in 9 days. Resting in bed, Vincent tells Julian that this duel is the perfect chance to see how strong their rivals, the Samyeon family, actually are. Vincent turns to Julian and asks if he has any useful insider info on the 6th son of Samyeon. Julian admits he isn't entirely sure, but warns that the power gap between them and an elite direct descendant is going to be massive. Refusing to just sit around, Vincent gets out of bed, claiming his body is healed enough to start moving again. Julian aggressively yells at him to treat his body right, reminding him that lightning magic is highly destructive and can ruin your system. Vincent pushes right through the pain, determined to train so he can face the best fighters the Samyeon family has to offer. Vincent steps outside to practice, thinking the empty field reminds him of old times when suddenly someone calls his name. Revan shows up with a friendly smile, greeting Vincent warmly after being apart for a long time. They stand in the middle of the field while Vincent tries to process why Revan suddenly showed up at the estate. Revan says he's glad Vincent looks healthy, despite almost dying, kicking off a serious talk between the two. Revan admits he was always curious about his own branch family line, since they completely lacked any real wealth or combat talent. He explains that, after asking a ton of questions, his dad finally named him the successor and took him to a top-secret spot. Revan remembers his dad taking him to a hidden door, claiming that not even the Patriarch of Adenka can enter without special permission. He describes the hidden archives, which is basically a giant vault holding 500 years of the Adenka family's dirty laundry and achievements. Vincent realizes these secret files might actually hold the historical records he needs to prove he didn't commit treason in his past life. Revan notices Vincent staring intensely and promises to take him inside the archives once he fully takes over his dad's job. Remembering something important, Revan pulls out a ridiculously expensive communication crystal that has an old recording on it. The crystal turns on, playing a recorded message from Master Hansen that immediately grabs Vincent's attention. Hansen's video message explains how the crystal's recording buttons work and brings up a very specific accident. Hansen gets straight to the point, dropping a truth bomb that leaves Vincent visibly shocked. He asks if they remember the workshop fire, explaining that the dragon skeleton naturally absorbs the exact magic type of whoever is using it. Hansen reveals that his blessing from a great god caused an explosive chemical reaction with the Crimson Lotus, making it impossible to forge safely. Vincent thinks over the research notes about the dragon skeleton piece while the recording plays out. As Revan prepares to head straight back to the workshop, Vincent asks him to tell Hansen to forge a hammer out of whatever dragon skeleton is left over. Vincent adds that he'll try to find another dragon skeleton to forge a proper sword later, before saying goodbye to Revan. Walking back through the hallways, Julian calls the whole thing useless trivia, but Vincent argues that keeping his options open is the smart play. Vincent says his real journey starts by winning the upcoming match against the sixth son of Samion. Julian points out that Malone's massive attack range and crazy physical piercing moves were an absolute nightmare to deal with. They figure out that if they can unlock and copy the inner magic flow of the lightning giant from Malone's memories, they actually have a shot at winning. Vincent argues that while hacking into a human memory is impossible, a god's memory should let them copy the elemental flow. The room shifts around them as they mentally trace the leftover pieces of divine energy. Sparks of blue electricity start appearing around Vincent, proving he successfully memorized the lightning giant's core flow. Julian lays down some ground rules, warning him that lightning magic is incredibly destructive and requires total bed rest until they get back to the fortress. Julian demands a promise of zero physical exercise, threatening to stop teaching him entirely if Vincent overdoes it. Arriving back at the base, the cadets line up in formation while gossiping about the school's welcome rituals. Vincent notices a weirdly large number of carriages and finds out he's about to get a formal engraving ceremony. The grand hall fills up with rows of uniformed military troops standing in strict rank order for the event. The Rank 1 cadet representative, Hannah Adenka, stands right at the front of the line looking important. Rank 5, Representative Abel Adenka, and Rank B, Representative Damien Adenka, take their spots alongside the lower-ranked groups. Vincent watches the direct descendants, noting just how much main character energy Hannah and her bodyguards are giving off. The crowd starts whispering in confusion, wondering who is actually qualified to do this specialized carving on the rock. A massive pressure fills the room as everyone realizes Patriarch Khan Adenka has personally shown up. The Patriarch commands Vincent to step forward, prompting a respectful salute from all the assembled cadets. The Patriarch takes Vincent's sword, making it clear that this honor was earned fairly through actual battle results. Looking completely serious, the Patriarch prepares to use the sword to record the historic achievement on the stone. The Patriarch blasts his massive magic energy directly into the monument, unleashing a ridiculous shockwave. The crowd watches in absolute awe, realizing just how terrifyingly overpowered the head of the Adenka family really is. The glowing name of Vincent Adenka is permanently burned into the monument as the Patriarch warns him never to forget his duty. After the show, the cadets excitedly talk about how cool the Patriarch was while looking around for Vincent to celebrate. Naturally, Vincent sneakily slips away to an empty training room, completely ignoring Julian's warnings to take a nap. He sits cross-legged and immediately starts forcing the volatile lightning magic through his internal body network. Julian mentally screams at him to stop the madness, completely exhausted by the fact that Vincent is already trying to explode his own body. Vincent concentrates harder, trying to get a perfect physical feel for this high-output elemental blessing. A massive internal surge of energy violently blasts through the room, leaving Julian wondering if the expansion actually worked. The internal blessing triggers a severe spiritual collapse, causing bright orange flames to completely cover Vincent's body. Vincent starts absorbing the overwhelming magic like a sponge, causing Julian to panic and start screaming for him to stop. The unstable heavenly exoskeleton lightning magic begins to rupture, making Vincent scream in pure agony from the physical strain. His eyes glow with an unstable light, while Julian frantically asks what the hell is wrong with his internal flow. The destructive energy tears right through Vincent's veins, feeling exactly like getting hit full force by a runaway freight train. Covered in fiery orange lightning sparks, Vincent struggles to keep conscious control over the rampaging power. Julian desperately reaches into the magical storm, realizing the lightning energy is literally about to explode the kid's heart. A massive spiritual presence suddenly shows up in the room as the blessing completely locks onto Vincent's body. An unfinished god appears out of the flames, coldly stating that the blessing was given exactly as requested. Vincent's real body keeps absorbing the high-output magic at a dangerously fast, alarming rate. Julian realizes Vincent is going to kick the bucket at this rate and tries to find a way to turn off the overloaded magic circuit. The divine presence warns that quitting now means instant death, forcing him to choose between playing it safe or gaining absolute power. Vincent refuses to give up, desperately holding on to the magical current despite the ridiculous, overwhelming power output. The unfinished god tells him to know his place, noting, "The kid took way more power than his fragile human body should ever hold." Realizing Vincent is too stubborn to let go, Julian gives up on stopping it and decides to help him manage the energy internally. Julian instructs Vincent to control the brain energy and force it to stay inside his physical boundaries if he wants to survive. Using his own remaining divine energy, Julian throws a supportive wave into the chaotic elemental mess. Julian successfully shields Vincent's straining heart, but the insane level of power quickly pushes him to his absolute limit. As the purple energy buffers his chest, Julian realizes he spent way too much juice and starts to literally evaporate. Terrified of completely disappearing, Julian makes a desperate mental prayer for literally anyone to come help them. The unstable magical energy hits a boiling point, flashing violently as Julian's ghost form begins to glitch out. Julian screams for anyone to help block the dangerous lightning output that's about to incinerate both of them. A figure using holy powers actually hears the desperate cry, revealing the same white-robed priest who previously healed Malone. Julian realizes his voice can reach holy class users, directing the arriving priest straight toward the center of the electric field. Seeing that Vincent still hasn't given up, Julian vows to stay anchored and demands to know if the priest can hear him. Introducing himself as a friendly neighborhood god, Julian explains that the priest needs to get close and heal the kid immediately despite the lethal electric barrier. The priest gets ready to move, while Julian uses every single ounce of his remaining butterfly wing power to suppress the lightning aura. The team effort ends in a blinding flash of Gaia's light, successfully fixing what was basically a massive training room disaster. Meanwhile, inside the Crimson Fortress, a determined young woman stands outside the main office. Dean Vargan Perota turns to see who it is, recognizing her as Siri, the loyal servant girl. Siri drops straight to her knees, passionately begging the powerful Dean to teach her magic. Dean Vargan remembers the intense fight between Vincent and Malone, noting he sensed some crazy high-latent magic inside Siri when he saved her from getting crushed by rocks. He accepts her request, but gives her a serious warning that learning magic is no joke, and his training routine has absolutely zero kindness. Siri explains she is sick and tired of only being useful for cleaning up Vincent's horrific wounds every time he comes home beaten to a pulp. She states her fierce desire to actually protect her master, making the Dean respect her determination despite her just being a maid. Suddenly, a massive magic shockwave shakes the building, leaving the staff completely stunned by the abrupt burst of heat. They run toward the source of the heat, demanding to know who was currently destroying the property value of the school. Vincent walks out surrounded by sparks of lightning, formally kneeling to thank the dean for agreeing to train Siri. Julian floats right next to him, looking visibly translucent and completely exhausted from their recent near-death spiritual struggle. Vincent tells Suri to train hard, and she bows deeply in gratitude before he leaves her with the strict dean. Dean Vargan notes he's been tracking everyone's growth since Malone got wrecked, turning around to plan the next set of brutal lessons. As Siri starts her magical training montage, Vincent walks away feeling a bit left out since he doesn't have a specialized combat teacher. Unfortunately, Vincent hasn't been able to learn any of the high-level martial arts that Arslan originally left for the Adenka family. Vincent demands to know where his assigned teacher is, but he is bluntly told that he basically has to find his own tutor. He finds out the family elders usually hook up potential heirs with elite teachers, leaving him completely abandoned because of his old reputation as a useless loser. Vincent realizes the corrupt elders are intentionally gatekeeping mentors to stunt his growth and keep the patriarch's personal faction weak. Determined to bypass the shady elders completely, Vincent decides there is only one authoritative person left to ask for help. A formal letter from Vincent is sent directly past the school staff, heading straight to the main family estate. The Grand Chamberlain hands the folded letter over to the master of the house, noting that it's highly important. Patriarch Khan Adenka cracks open the seal and reads that his son is directly asking him for a high-level combat coach. The letter mentions that Vincent successfully stole Malone's lightning giant power, causing the leadership to heavily debate the political drama of this request. Realizing this is the only place his son can turn for safety, the Patriarch asks about a candidate who actually uses authentic Adenka swordsmanship. They bring up a powerful master of the lightning element, formerly known as the Thunder Giant, who holds a pretty unique position. They note that entering the fortress is something the guy has to actually want to do himself, naming the target as the vice captain of the White Sword Unit. The chosen warrior turns out to be Merlin, a heavily scarred, red-haired combat specialist. The leadership sets up a strategic wager. If Vincent can actually win his upcoming tournament match, Merlin will officially step in as his personal trainer. They finalize the deal regarding Merlin, confident that putting high stakes on the line will force the kid to level up. Merlin stands alone on the giant stone staircase, thinking about his past missions while holding onto his sheathed sword. Another warrior approaches the scarred veteran, starting a conversation about how ridiculously fast the young master is currently growing. A formal lady representative greets Merlin, making it clear she is here on urgent official family business rather than just dropping by to say hi. Merlin asks about the new training school assignment, sighing over how his specific unit never gets any real respect. She explains that there is someone the Patriarch specifically wants him to train, naming the black sheep young master, Vincent. Hearing that the kid has already somehow stolen the blessing of the lightning giant makes Merlin stand up in pure shock. Merlin complains about getting dragged into elder politics, prompting her to lay out the official bet regarding Vincent's upcoming tournament fight. 7 days before the friendly exchange meeting, Vincent undergoes brutal training to master his control over the lightning giant. He unleashes a flurry of rapid-fire slashes, realizing that simply wrapping electricity around his sword isn't going to cut it. Vincent forces himself to pump up the volume, covering his entire body in violent, crackling, magical electricity. Julian watches the explosive practice session from the sidelines, sighing deeply at the sheer amount of physical property damage Vincent leaves behind. Julian critiques the lackluster performance compared to how hard they're working, leaving Vincent yelling at him in pure frustration. Vincent tells Julian to shut up with the complaints while he stops to think about his actual strategic options. Reports show the corrupt elders are actively pooling their influence to gatekeep heirs and suppress the Patriarch's personal forces. Because the elders are systematically refusing to pay for external help, the current generation is forced to rely entirely on their own luck. Vincent realizes he has to win entirely through his own power, suddenly hitting on an idea about using alternative skill sets. Julian reminds him that he also has the elite Samyon family swordsmanship from his previous life, which he accidentally flexed back at Hansen's workshop. Vincent hesitates, noting that using Samyon moves in a public arena would cause an absolute political shitstorm among the rival clans. He also wonders if his current body could even handle his past life's overpowered skills without completely snapping in half. At the exact same time, inside the massive main castle of the Samyon Archduchy, A brutal selection match reaches its violent end. An elite fighter stands victorious over a massive beast as the elders show up to announce the final tournament roster. They name Vincent Adenka as his scheduled opponent, warning that the kid is climbing the ranks suspiciously fast with some weird achievements. The Samian higher-ups state they absolutely hate inspiring underdog stories, demanding a brutal display of pure dominance. The chosen direct descendant prepares his sword amidst the bloody mess of the selection arena. The ruthless sixth direct descendant, Kaban Samion, vows to absolutely obliterate Vincent, aiming to prove to the world that heartwarming anime plot armor doesn't exist. Thank you for watching Buff Goblin. If you're interested in reading this for yourself, you should pick up Standard of Reincarnation on Chapter 41, or check out my hundreds of hours of audiobooks just like this one. Check the description for more information. Thank you for supporting me.